Good morning, everybody. I am Becky Coffey, and we're here to paint Polar Post today. I hope you enjoy it. It's a little original design I created a few months ago. I'm going to walk you through some of the supplies up front, and then we'll start to paint. I'll provide tips. I've not worked with you ladies before, so I'm not sure if we have beginners or some people maybe are sharing this with their children or grandchildren. So I'll provide sort of a, basic level, but feel free to change up or use supplies or techniques that you're used to. This particular piece does not, there's nothing so specific about it that some of your past history might not help you, get through it in some unique ways. I also highly recommend changing up any colors to your more preferred palette. I just think it's a little fun thing to do. The other thing is that I did share a Valentine's pattern just by making some small tweaks, all the same colors for you to change this up. Ironically, this weekend we have that polar plunge that came down, the Arctic cold that came down. I'm in Colorado, and it is absolutely freezing outside. It's like 9 degrees or 6 degrees or something. So I think this is very fitting. So I hope you enjoy. Right. So here's our piece. This is what we're doing today. And this surface came from CD wood. It has the edges that are sort of deckled like a stamp, so I just think it lends itself to it. Just absolutely adorable, but truly could be done on any piece of wood or surface that you prefer. These really basic techniques. The only thing you might not be as familiar with if you've never really dry brushed very much, which is this background, and then lettering, which I am an anti-cricketer for this kind of project. Just in my soul, because I've toll painted. So I love the idea of hand painting. But I also love the cleanliness of doing something like on a Cricut or really outlining it and painting it in. So if you do need that kind of help, I just recommend changing up the pattern a little bit by drawing out the letters. This is your pattern. And what I mean by drawing out your letters is just take this and sketch in the extra lines if you want that, and then you can paint inside of the lines, if that makes sense. But otherwise, we're going to do brush strokes right over those, and we're going to treat them just like you would any other brush stroke. So I hope you find that a fun learning. If you're not familiar with it. I think it's something, it's underutilized in what we do, and I love to add it. I used to be extremely good at it, but I did have a medical thing happen that kind of slowed me down, and I'm not as good as I once was. So we're going to talk through that and how do you make corrections. So I hope you enjoy that part. Here's the actual pattern. And, excuse me, this is the original. And then I've made some slight changes, pardon me, to Valentine's and hearts and to you. Excuse me. I'm going to quickly go through the brushes that I use, and I want to encourage you to use what you're most comfortable with. I am not a brush person where I stick to one brand or one type of brush religiously. I change it up to use what is suiting me during that painting session, because I find that sometimes my hand is heavier, sometimes it's lighter. But by and large, for the lettering, we are going to use a number 2. And so I've got a 1, 2, and a 0. And so you can see they're short liners and they have sort of a blunt tip. The difference is the blunt tip, I think, helps give us these blunt ends on our letters. If you have a tremendous control and you use liners, feel free to use more of a long liner like these. I used to have that control and I don't so much now. So I don't try to fight it. I just went to a shorter liner like these. And as you can see, this is Master's Touch from Hobby Lobby. So when I need to buy new ones, that's what I'm doing. These are old brushes I've had. One's a Princeton and one's a Royal. As you can see, that's from forever ago. So I keep brushes forever. Like I said, I don't switch up brands or stick to a specific brand. I get what I like best. Here's the second set of brushes that I use almost exclusively as I'm doing so much of my painting, and that is corner shaders. I love the length here. See how the toe, which is the short end, is much longer in this brush than it is in this one? I call these little chunky monkeys. Love these, but for something small, I'm going to put that one aside, and I want these longer toes. And the way you control that is you only put your paint in about that much of your brush, and then you allow it to go through the rest. The reason why I like a long bristle is you want to try and keep as much paint out of down here as possible. For one, for the life of your brush, but two, for the control of where you're putting the color. And the bigger you can use of a corner shader, or an angle shader. I started calling them corner shaders years ago. The more control you'll have, like the less you use, the bigger and the wider, you get a very nice taper. If you are a square shader type person, I highly recommend you stick with it. I don't wish for you to try and reinvent your wheel. I just prefer not to use a square, but there's a ton of people that do. So feel free to use that. I also keep multiples of the same size. That way I can keep painting if I've messed a brush up or I've overloaded it or it gets wet or I need to interrupt myself. My other most favorite in the whole wide world are filberts. So filbert and angles are what I use almost exclusively when I paint. I never use rounds and I never use squares for my majority of my painting. I also love to keep scruffies, and I keep all my brushes as they scruff because I tend to do a lot of scruffing. And so you don't want to use your newer brushes to do that. So I keep a variety of more scruffy brushes to do a variety of different, mostly blending out the edges and stuff like that. Spotters or small liners. A spotter, as you can see, has a very tiny, this is a spotter. So it's a very small detail brush, and we'll be doing the nose with that. The other thing I really love are these tiny script liners. They hold more paint. And so especially if you are doing lining a small area. Now with this particular project, the lines that we do are with a micron pen. And that's why you need the spray sealer, because if you've used micron pens, you know that it is about impossible to brush sealer over them. You know, you can blot it on and try to pat it on to try and keep it from moving, but invariably it does. I have not found a great alternative for a tiny line with other ink pens. So unless you can do tiny lines with your brush, we're going to do the line work with a very small micron, and then we're going to do a spray sealer. We're going to let that dry thoroughly, and then you can do your most preferred brush on sealer. You skip the spray on sealer altogether if you can brush on your lines. And like I said, there's not a ton of lines, but especially the cancel mark for the postage is lined. There's some lines around some of the other things, and then the lettering is a liner. Okay, so back to brushes. So the background that we're going to be doing is dry brushed. Now, if you are not comfortable with dry brush or you've never done it before, I'll show you how to do it, but there's not one particular way. And the whole point to this piece is it's supposed to look like he's delivering in the middle of the night, and that this is you know, like a brightness in a snowstorm. And so that's what the whole, you know, piece is supposed to evoke, is just the very dead of night. And so we need to be able to get our letters to pop. And so that's kind of the purpose. So that's why I chose this, so you still get that dark variegation in the blue. So I use a variety of flats to get that. And then I will also scrub in and scruff to get the right level of brightness of the white to make your letters pop. So the other things that you're going to use today is a ruler, and then some version of a sponge, and then of course your handy dandy scribe tool. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I hope you enjoy it. All right. So step one, I'm going to go through very quickly because it's very repetitive, and it just really is base coating, the most fundamental base coating. This is just a normal piece of wood. I actually ran out of these surfaces. I gave a bunch away, and so I used this particular product, but I recommend using whatever primer you prefer. Uh-oh, and the dog has joined us, so hopefully he doesn't bark. So this particular primer is a Folk Art brand, and it was what was available. I hadn't ever used it before, but it was fine. The base coat is Americana. Light mocha. I love this color. I just feel like it's a good neutral for me, the way I paint. Some people like to base coat in things like gray, or you have your different like normal palette is what it's called when it's your color style. It's still called a palette. So like my palette, I used to love to base coat with buttermilk, but now light mocha is my now preferred. Now I mix my primer or sealer with my paint. You can choose to do that or not to do that. You know, it's up to you. It can cut out a step. You still may have to go back in with a second coat of just your base coat color. I'm going to take just a second to say, if you use diaper wipes or wet wipes, I would just say make sure you're not getting one with an oil in it. Make sure that it doesn't have any emollients in it, because it can change your surface or how your paint interacts. So I am still a paper towel user. All right, so what we're going to do, I'm going to show you two different ways. Here's just a typical sponge. And I keep it dry on one end and I dampen it on the other. And you don't want it super wet. So what I do is I get it wet and then I squeeze it out so that this is just very damp. But this top is dry because then it keeps it away from your fingers. Now the other thing I will recommend, if you are a texture person or you've got really beautiful nails or whatever, keep some rubber gloves around. We are going to spatter with this, and then we're gonna pounce our paint on. So either way, you could get very messy fingers, and for some people that's a concern. Other people don't care. So that would be my tip, is to just have, and I reuse my gloves, so they last me a while. I don't have to rebuy and rebuy. And you can get a very inexpensive pack with just a few, like I think there's 10 gloves for like $2 at like Walmart. Also, sometimes they have them at the $1.25 store. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to load it up, but you do need to make sure it's loaded very evenly. You don't want blobs. You really want to make sure it's even. And for this particular project, you can just pounce directly on and really just cover it. Now, if you were trying to do a variegated, very natural looking, I just show you here, you do, when you're using a sponge, you pounce and move and twist. Because if you're using different colors or you're trying to get a really natural not even, not patterned background, you need to move that around, because if you go like this, you're getting exact same holes in a row. Now this particular technique is strictly to get the paint on quickly, but on MDF, which is what this is, sometimes MDF has some odd characteristics. It used to, it doesn't seem to so much now, but it would be like, it would repel paint in certain areas and stuff. So that's why I sponge it on, but also to give it a little tooth. I don't know if you can see, but there's a little bit of tooth on here, and that really is to help you with your dry brush. So if your preference is a super smooth finish, you can do that, and you can dry brush on a smooth finish. It takes you a little bit longer to build up, and you may get streaks, which are easy enough to fix. I'm going to show you how to do that. But anyway, that's why we're doing this technique, is because this is MDF, and you do want just a little bit of tooth. Now, the other thing is I used to do production painting when ceramics were all the rage back in the 90s, 80s, and 90s. And this was how I got a little bit of tooth, but it also allowed me to base coat very, very quickly. So as you can see, you can get in there and just get it going. Now, you also see how when I was pouncing harder and faster, you've got a lot of bigger bubbles. You're going to go back and very gently get rid of them, because we do not want all that added texture. We want to get rid of it, so we're going to just gently pat it out. Now, if you do find that it is a little too bumpy, sand it with a very fine sandpaper, and you can get rid of it. And you just go both sides. Now, the one thing I will tell you is that I did not do the edges because I liked that look. I don't know why. I feel like it just gave it, more texture to it, and it looked ripped. But if you don't like that, you can go ahead and finish the whole edge as well, if you buy this piece of wood. And it's like a couple of dollars from CD Wood. It's less than $3. Sometimes it's on sale. So you're going to do this both sides, and then you're going to dry it. And if you are a drying tool person, either a heat tool or a blow dryer, you really want these very, very dry between every single step of this project. Sometimes it's hard to transfer your pattern onto the dry brushed white. So you definitely want to make sure that is dried out very, very well. But anyway, either way, between every single coat, you're going to make sure this is super, super dry. So this particular step, number one, get her done, let it set aside for a while. You're going to apply parts of the pattern multiple times. Oh, I apologize. I was going to show you one more thing. This is, if you've never bought any of these, you can get them at like Walmart. You can get them online. Sometimes you can get them at the dollar store, but they come usually in multiple and usually different sizes. I've had these for years. This one, gosh, has really been years. This one is very good because it's got very small holes, but it's the same thing. Dampen it, put it in your paint, and pat it out, and then rewash, let it dry. You will have these forever. So especially if you're doing, let's say you have a lot of children or grandchildren and you make them a Christmas ornament every year, this is a really great way to just get a lot of base coating done and out of the way. And if you're careful and as you learn it, you'll learn to make it very subtle. But again, if it's too much, just sand it off. So anyway, I wanted to show you that in case you've never used these. All right, so we're going to set that aside. So we're going to have waited, and we're going to say that we are all fully dry. And I have all my information laid out here. So we are going to move right along as if we're dry and we've waited to dry. Okay, so this is what you're going to have. Very subtle texture. All done. You need to kind of keep in mind the upper edge because we are going to tape those off. And depending on when you choose to remove your tape, you just want to make sure you know which side is top. So what we're going to do, I'm going to show you, and you may know this, but again, I'm trying to kind of think ahead if there's anybody that might be closer to beginning on their painting journey. Anytime you're drawing a line, you're going to draw 3 marks and you're going to connect those. And especially the longer you have that you want to draw a straight line, the more you need, or the more spread out they need to be. So what I mean by that is, for one, to get a more accurate edge, just start in the middle of your ruler. If you start at the end, sometimes it can, throw you off a bit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the outest, like we're going to pretend like these little scallops are not here. We're just going to use the very outside edge. In this case, I'm using 6. It calls for 5/16 in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those are those teeny tiny little marks. And we're going to do 3. 1 in the middle. We're going to go to the far out edge. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the reason again is because when we connect these, the farther apart they are, the more accurate it's going to be. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to show you another thing too. When you're doing things, you might think it might be easier to put it on this edge, but see how it can rock because it doesn't have the full amount underneath it. You definitely want your ruler on the item if possible, because then it won't rock and then you'll be more accurate. So we're just going to line it up, and just very gently draw our line in. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put that aside. Actually, let me get rid of that because it's tall and will get in my way. I use this tape, but you could use whatever you've got. We're not going to rub it down really hard because that's when you have a problem with it lifting paint, is if you rub down really hard. So if you have like cello tape, just whatever kind of brand, that's fine. What you're going to do is you're going to line it up with that line. And the whole purpose of this is that the mocha that we put down here is going to be retained, and it's going to be our edge. And we're going to paint in this dark blue. Now, the reason why I base coated everything is, again, MDF can be a little finicky. And sometimes it can repel paint. And I found that if I get one neutral base down for it, then I'm feeling much better about what I put on top being even. So that's why we base coated the whole thing, even though a lot of it will be covered. But on the back, it won't be. So we're going to do the same thing here. And we're just going to very gently put our tape down. And again, please skip ahead if this is something that you don't need any tutelage on, or you find it boring or whatever. We're just gently putting it down. I'm going to show you why we're doing it gently. Well, I'm going to explain that because it won't pull our paint up. But also, we're going to burnish the inside. And by burnishing the inside, we're going to seal. Now, I'm going to also show you another trick. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to prevent the paint from bleeding under. So we're going to be putting a dark blue, and we don't want that on our light mocha edge of our stamp. Okay. So fold those under so the sticky isn't messing with us. All right. Sorry, I'm off camera here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to take, actually, I like to use, if you have a burnisher, you could use that, but I'm going to use the edge, just a smooth, a smooth edge, and I'm actually touching down right here, just on the edge. I'm not touching down out here, and I'm just burnishing along the edge, and what that's doing is it's sealing that edge, and you're not going to get any bleed under. Now, this particular piece is kind of small and it's maybe not as important, but let's say if you were doing something really precise or very large, this becomes more critical. The second thing is take a tiny bit of your paint and you want it, a little bit of water in there, but you still want mostly full paint, full-bodied paint. And you're going to brush along that edge. And what that does is then any little extras that are left, you're going to seal that with the right color paint to prevent anything you're going to be putting on top of it from bleeding under the tape. So just really quickly, and you don't need to try and force it. There's nothing like that going on. You can just gently brush along. And then what you have is fully sealed. So not only do you have it well sealed because of the burnishing on the edge, but then also the addition of the base color. The other thing you can do is you can use a clear primer, like a barrier coat. There's a lot of products out there that you could use, like a matte medium or something like that. So there's a ton of ways, but again, you're just trying to seal that so that when we pounce on the blue, we're getting a nice strong line. All right, so we're gonna let that dry for a moment. So while we're doing that, I'll talk you through what we're gonna do. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna do the blue, and then we're gonna go ahead and splatter it. As you can see, it has some very subtle snow, and I didn't want these to be, you know, super distracting. I just wanted to kind of get the sense that there's a snowstorm going on. So what we do is we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do the blue, then we're gonna splatter. Then we're going to apply the pattern. It doesn't really say that in your pattern packet, but the reason why is, see how you've got dark blue edges around your bear? You want to maintain those. And so we kind of need to know where he's sitting so that we don't get our white too crazy and down on top of it. Okay, so that should have given us time to get ourselves ready. What I did here is I just soaked it. I saturated it and I've got it sitting to the side. So now I'm going to use this one and I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier. I got a little bit of water in it, but then I'm taking out most of the water. So it's just damp. And two reasons you want it only damp is the adhesion for the paint. The more water it has, the less adhesion you could get. And then secondly, it's going to be really transparent. And then the final thing is that the texture gets bigger. The more water you have in it, you could get really big bubbles. And we're trying to avoid that. Again, we want really subtle texture. So again, fill this very evenly. And if you have a golden retriever like me, pick out any golden glitter. All right. So I have a fairly even coat. And then I'm just going to go in. I'm pushing kind of hard to get that to come down. The other little trick that you're using, especially, and if you've never done stenciling, that some of these tips apply over to stenciling, is going straight up and down. Instead of squishing around, you want to go straight up and down on those edges, especially because then you're not going to push that paint underneath your tape. Didn't get quite enough. And this doesn't have to be a super strong solid coat. You know, if there's a little bit of bleed through, that's fine. But you do want, you know, basically a solid coat. Make sure I'm still on camera here. I am learning how to do this video thing, and it has been a journey, let me tell you. And I'm doing this on my cell phone, so it doesn't have some of the flexibility of some of our pros that have nice big cameras and stuff. So bear with me while I'm getting all of these details of how to do this. I promise my next video will be better. All right, we're almost done. Okay, so then what we're going to do is we really need this to dry. If you do use a tool, you need to be careful to kind of keep it off of the tape because you could melt your tape. And then you've got melted tape, which is a whole different problem. So let this dry. You can take the tape off right now. Some people choose not to. It was interesting to watch people doing a technique similar to this where, you know, some people wanted the tape off, other people didn't. Either way, you do need this to be thoroughly, thoroughly dry. this kind of technique, you can easily dig holes in it. You've got multiple layers. You're going to be dry brushing. So you really need this dry. We're going to go ahead and set this aside because we have magic. In comes the magic. So here's our next step. And I use this kind of box. And typically I would not have taken the tape off for this, but you want your spatter on before you take your tape off. But for this, I'm not too worried about it. And in fact, I can do both of these at the same time. So if you've not spattered before, there's tools on the market, and there's a more recent market tool. Well, it's been out for many years, but it's just a newer tool. Very long bristle brush, very stiff, from Ranger ink, and you can kind of tap it, and the length kind of splatters it. I am still very old-fashioned. I have tried so many different kinds of techniques, and honestly, tried and true, I just continue to go back to this. So I'll take this time to just say I'm not really great about following my own patterns. I will continue to refer back to them because I am really notorious for changing things up and redesigning or coming up with new different kinds of ways to do things. So if there's anything different between what I'm doing right now and your pattern, I apologize. So what I'm doing now is I have my light mocha and my white. I am going to make a heavy cream consistency. You do not want this super thin. So you want kind of like 3 to 1. You want 3 parts paint and maybe 1 part water. And because you don't want your spatters, the more water you have, you can get out of control. Your spatters can get a little crazy. So what I do is I fill my brush, but if I feel like I have too much water, I go ahead and on a paper towel, I go ahead and suck out the water. So I've got, again, about a 3 to 1 mix. And that's a little too, I want a little bit more water. So I put it on my fingertip. And that way when I pick it up, it kind of facilitates it. And again, you kind of want this to come to the background. All right, so I just cleaned that out, sucking the water out. And now I'm going to do the same thing with white. And now I have another dog up here. So again, hopefully they don't bark. Okay, so go ahead and saturate your brush and set it aside, or, I would typically get up and wash them out. I'm just going to show you my little trick here. This is a soda flat. I keep one around for splattering, and that way I can contain it. The other thing is just to put it in the top of a trash can, if you have an open trash can that's large enough for your piece, and then it can contain it. And then hang on really quick. Boys, lay down. They were up there fussing. Okay, so we've got our splatter. And you're just, again, very light, not looking for anything so bold. All right, now tip. If you're keeping this on and you're keeping the tape on and you just like the idea of that, you need to know which side this is, and you need to mark it, and then you need to pay attention. So on this one, it's this side right here. And so on the back, I'm going to mark it with a T. And that way I know when I put my pattern on that I've got it centered properly. So keep that in mind. If you know, again, some people kept the tape on when I did this technique in a class. Other people wanted to get rid of it right away. It is really up to you. It may help you keep a clean line as you're doing step 4, which is the light mocha to start building out our background. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and set these aside, let them dry, let that one dry. And I'm going to start to show you how we're going to build out your the light mocha background to start to put the polar post lettering on. Now, on this one, I did not put the pattern on because I wanted to show you, see how low I got it? I need to go back and kind of fix that. Or I won't be able to see my pattern very well. So let's go ahead and get our pattern applied. Now for this, the brand I used came from Michael's, and it was Craft Mart. I've used to use Saral, S-A-R-A-L, Saral, and I couldn't find it. It's a chalk paper. It can be a little messy to use, but anyway, I've used these two and they've worked okay. Recently, I did buy some transfer paper from Hobby Lobby, and it was terrible. And I bought transfer paper from there, and it was like Mylar, and it wasn't like tissuey like transfer paper is. So just be careful as our new world post-COVID products, or whatever we've got going on. I don't know. Anyway, this is that. I need to make sure I've got the right side down, so I do. I can see my mark. All right. So I'm going to take my pattern. I'm going to show you a trick that one of the ladies in our club, she used to tape her pattern to the top and she would keep it. And I've never been one for that, but there is a stage in this that it might help you. And so essentially you keep the pattern attached and you just keep flopping it back. Because as you get along, you might want to reapply, like his collar, reapply where his eyeballs are. And then you'll certainly need to apply, for your cancel mark for your postage. So it's up to you if you like that. You just tape it on one side or another so that, and it does need to be thoroughly taped on. So you need to make sure you're thoroughly dry and you're good to go. The other thing I guess I could say right now, I was going to say it a little later, but so that I can protect my back after, since I base coated it early, I went ahead and finished it. I spattered it with the dark blue, and then I actually sealed it. And that way it's done. And if I get something on it, I can wipe it off. If I didn't base coat it, it wouldn't really matter. But I did. I base coated it, so I didn't want to waste the time. Again, I used to do production work, so I was always trying to find little fast ways to do it. The other kind of thing, I splatter a lot of backgrounds, and I used a couple of colors from the front usually. This one I liked the cleanness of just the one. But the other thing is stencils are huge right now. Some people even, use stamps and paint, and they stamp things on. So there's a lot of ways to finish your back. The very old-fashioned way, we used to just finish it in one dark color, like a dark black or dark green or dark blue, something really subtle. So anyway, that's how I finished the back. We'll get to that, but again, I just did it because I had already base coated it. Okay. Let's get our pattern on, and I am going to use a piece of tape to make sure it stays in place. Actually, I'm going to do the inside and the top side. I need to be able to insert my to get my pattern on there. I need to be able to insert my tracing paper. And so I'm going to come up from underneath and stick that on. Sorry, I usually try to save my palette paper, and I forgot to do that. I was all caught up in teaching, and I forgot to wipe off. Oh well. There we go. Okay. I laid this down the way I tested it, so I know that I've got the right one, but I will test just again, just to make sure. Yep, it's the right one. I'm gonna lay this under here, and I'm, again, right now, all I'm doing is the bear, because I need to make sure that I don't get my white that goes behind the puller post. I don't want it too far down. All right, we're gonna take our handy dandy stylus, and I'm pushing really hard. White paper, I just never have great luck. So I am pushing super hard. Usually I would not do this on my see-through pattern, but I thought it might work better to show you. I like to do it with a pattern on paper because when I push harder, I don't rip. As you'll notice, the design is intentionally pointy. Like, I liked the idea of him having like little points in various places. So that was a design choice. And you can accentuate it if you want, like right here on his hip, and then it's flat. And then there's another point and it goes down to a point. I'd gotten a cute gift in a bag, and it had a penguin, I think, and it was on like a postage stamp or something. I can't remember. It was many years ago, and I just thought it was so cute. And when I saw this surface, I think it kind of reminded me of that. So I drew up a little chunky, pointy bear. We don't need the collar right now. I am gonna put it on. I'm just gonna put the bottom on and then the top on. But for right now, I would say to you, just follow the pattern across, because you're gonna paint base coat all the way across. And I don't want you to get confused by the collar. And you're gonna re-add the collar. Watching somebody trace is like watching paint dry. I apologize. Okay, let me test, see how I did. Okay, did pretty good. All right, let us set that aside and peel off our little tape here. And I'm going to show you how I go about starting the dry brush process. And this is kind of what we're shooting for. This is the first layer. And I really like dry brush just because I like a lot of texture, very whimsical, very soft. I don't always do a lot of very precise, super architectural structured design work. And that's just my preferred style. To be honest, if you did not like that, you could just figure out what the right thing to be would be and just paint a solid white. And then just have it that way and just do your lettering right on top of that. So as I said, I I change things up as I go. And that would be something I would try. Maybe the next time I paint it, I'll just paint the whole thing up here behind the lettering, just solid white, and just go with that. But that's not what the pattern says. So now what we're going to do is we're going to gather our brushes. I need to not leave brushes in water. Dry that one out. Okay, we're going to bring out this sort of set of brushes. Dry brushing is one of those things that the larger the brush you can use in the area, the better off you're going to be. Back in the day when we did dry brushing a lot, we would use paper bags to take off the paint. I now use a paper towel, but if you do decide you really like the dry brushing and you start to use it, you may actually find that having a paper bag nearby might be a good technique for you. If you need a bit of a pattern, I would recommend kind of looking at this and drawing in some edges. I don't think for me it's anything that I thought I might need, but I think for this is a peach colored chalk pencil. So I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'm going to kind of give myself some guidelines just to give you guys that as an alternative to just going in. And then I'm just going to gently arc it edge to edge. So that's kind of the shape. And the shape is not intended to be specific. So your shape may be like, you can see mine, like it goes down here and it down, you know, it's not perfect and it should not be. There is no perfect. It's yours and it's going to be great. All right. So the first thing we're going to do, and what we're trying to get to is this, is we're going to use a little light mocha. By the way, if you were ever a palm smasher, I was just told that they're finding that that's giving people arthritis and carpal tunnel. So a little tip for you, don't do that if you've not heard that. So yeah, I had somebody tell me that in a class recently, and I was like, oh, I should probably not do that then. Okay, so with dry brushing, you literally want a dry brush. So you can put a little bit of water in your brush, but you're literally going to be taking out all the water up by the ferrule. You bend it over and kind of pull it up, and that will get rid of everything that's closer to the ferrule. So this is really dry. It's a little damp just so the paint moves in the brush, but it's really dry. You're going to pick it up, and then in one spot, because you're going to go back to this spot, and you can even pick up paint directly from that spot. And then the big thing I would just tell you, again, biggest brush you feel comfortable with. This one is a 1/2 inch square. Have totally random, don't know where it came from. And you're going to start in the middle of the design. And this is really important because this is really where you want it to be, almost solid white. So if you get a streak, it's okay, if that makes sense. So right here, you're going to start, you're going to lay it almost flat, and you're going to, and see how it picks up the texture. And that's why we dry brush. I mean, that's why we did the pouncing. I'm going to flip it over. And you're just going to get more and more comfortable. Now, see how right here in the middle, there's this smear? That's why we're starting the way we're starting. For one, we're putting it in the middle, but we're also starting with a darker color. We're not starting with what we're trying to get to, which is almost a pure white. So I'm going to reload my brush. Again, wipe it out. I think you guys can see that. Yeah. And the less you put on, the thinner it's going to be. and you're going to have to do more coats, and it's just going to take you a little longer. And as you kind of build up your confidence with the, again, I'm laying it and stroking it. The more you do it, you'll get more confident. You can add more paint, and you can kind of be like, I'm going to go right in there to make it even. So see how I evened that out by just being like doot, doot, doot right in the middle. All right. So we're going to keep going in this middle, and we want this almost solid. So bear with me. This one's a little bit like watching paint dry, but I did want you to see the buildup. Now I'm going to switch it, and I'm going to go vertical, and see how I'm kind of bringing it into that corner. And this is giving me a little bit more control over my shape. And I don't have a ton of paint, so kind of the tip there is get the majority off here. And now I still have paint in there, and I can kind of then go to this side, and I can build it up. Now I'm going to kind of come down here. Now I will tell you, I found, so dry brushes back in the day when it was a really popular technique for like if you were doing it on clothing or whatever, it was really like dry brushing brushes were really stiff. Almost like the scruffy scrubbers that you buy to remove paint, you know, that you can get today. I find that just a nice soft brush does way better for me. My computer went to sleep with my instructions. Bear with me one moment. There we go. I don't want to lose my instructions because, like I said, I'll go off script. I love to design. I love to make things different. Okay, back to brushes. So I really have learned more recently that, again, my angle shader, love them so much. This really helps me kind of get down in these, and I'm going very light because I have a ton of paint, and this is my edge. So I want my edge to not be as dark as my center. So I'm very light. I don't know if, can you guys see what I'm doing? Hang on. I don't know if this is helpful. I'm kind of keeping my brush at an angle so that the toe of my angle is what I'm putting down, and I'm putting it down very gently. And see how I got a smear there? It's okay because I really do want this almost white. And that's why I was saying earlier, design choice wise, if you prefer to just sort of put it on there and paint it white and maybe just scruff out your edges and make your edges sort of blurry, that would be a fine design choice. This, I just really love this technique. And I just feel like I can make an individual piece a little bit different. I can play with it. It's just something I really enjoy. Okay, so let's reload. And again, I'm gonna go in, make sure I'm in a good spot, and you can see. Oh, see, look at that. I kind of made a mistake there. So I am going to take a wet brush, and I'm going to scumble this out. So scumbling is just where you scumble your brush, move it around. Now that's really wet, and that is bad, 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 bad for dry brushing. So I just put it down and I press. If you scrub, you move paint, you could dig a hole. It's just bad. So you just want to push down. Now, that also removed that peach chalk. Just so you know, love this product. I don't know where that, it comes, you can buy it on the internet. I got the Uniball. It comes in one of the little lead cases. And then I just purchased, this from Hobby Lobby, but you can see the lead is a 0.05 lead, I believe, and it's peach, but you can buy it in tons of different colors. So search like, it was a Japanese product, a 0.05 colored lead. Anyway, I love it. But you can see that water came off with water. It's a lovely, lovely product. Okay, now I've laid that down. It's a little wet. I am going to put in just a tiny bit of water, and then we're going to come back over here and we're going to, because what happens is you get dry up high. So we kind of need to refresh our brush because I got a little distracted with my pencil. Okay, so we're back to a mostly dry brush. We're going to fill and we're going to wipe. And again, we're just using the same one. And we used to do it, like I said, on a brown paper sack. Now I just use paper towel. Okay, now we're going to, in the middle, so I'm going to turn it because it's super wide. I'm going to turn it. And then I'm gonna get it back up in this corner now that I have some of that paint out. And then I'm gonna come up across the top here. And here I'm kind of pushing in and then pulling back. Push in, pull back. So when you're doing dry brush, these are not your best brushes. You should really be aware this can be super tough on brushes. So you kind of want to choose your brushes that are maybe a little older in your life cycle. I used to be able to find tons of brushes at, ironically, a store called Ross, which is like a outlet store. I have no idea, but I probably bought a ton of the packages, and a lot of these came from those. And I don't know where they got them from, but they're no brand. They're just brushes. And because I was teaching a variety of non-art students, they worked really well. They were student grade. So a lot of my brushes, I kind of retain better brushes for more fine work where I'm really trying to do brush strokes or something like that. But otherwise, I don't really care about brush brand or whatever. I use whatever's feeling good that day. Okay. Now I'm just getting sloppy. I want that to be, again, more full in the middle. And see how where we kind of started, where it's just really and again, focusing on that middle and then feathering it out to the edges. And I want it almost solid. I want that blue, so we're not going in and we're not making strokes. We're still doing it where we're on the side. Okay, so on this one, the reason why I did it this way is because I wanted to show you that when you put your pattern on, my bear kind of goes up into the white. So if you need to correct, my computer keeps going to sleep. If you need to correct, I'm going to use this brush, and I'm going to see how it's kind of frayed. You could use something smaller, but this is where your frayed brushes come in. And again, I just sort of keep them set aside. I keep a whole batch of scruffy brushes because I like to do stuff like this. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what stage, but if you find that you're getting an edge you don't like, you're going to scumble. You don't want it super, you don't want a ton of paint in here, but you want paint. And I'm just going to go back up in and I'm going to push up into it. And you're still getting it, you're still seeing it, but because you're pushing up, it's not a streak. and see how I'm making it recede. And so I made this one specifically to show you, because I think that sometimes when we don't, and again, I don't paint with you ladies, or haven't painted with you yet, so your questions haven't come in. But when I paint with ladies, a lot of times they're afraid because they don't have a harsh line. And that's partly what this project is about, is kind of use a little bit more creativity, be a little bit more fluid, because there is no pattern for this part of it. It's just more of looking at it. And like I said, if you needed to, you could trace on a bit of an edge to kind of keep it within. But I really wanted people to get a little more comfortable doing this kind of technique and knowing that there's ways to fix it. I'm a self-taught artist. I've had a ton of education, but I've never really finished graphic design school. I made that 1980s old-fashioned go get married instead, and should have stayed in college. And so I don't have like a professional background as an artist. I have just painted literally since I was 6 years old. And so a lot of what I do is because I don't know what other people's rules are, I just paint. That means I'm breaking rules all the time, but I'm learning to fix things. Okay, so see how you've got a subtle edge, but you've receded it. Now the second thing I wanted to show you here, I'm going to clean that brush out, and we're going to use that same brush. See how it goes all the way to the edge. And this is what I was saying earlier, if you prefer to keep it taped off. See how this one has got a strong edge? I actually want this to go out a little bit more, but I'll show you what I'm going to do with that one to get it to go out all the way. But for this one, I've got it too close. So I've loaded my toe about that much. And I think you can see what I'm doing over here. I'm going to really keep it tight, so I'm not spreading it super far. Now, I live in Colorado. That means we're really dry. So I'm going to put a little water along my edge. And that's going to help me spread. I'm going to come in and I'm going to drop a shadow. So as you can see, I'm up on my toe. My heel of my brush is not even touching. And I'm just pushing into that corner. And see how it recedes it back, but it's not gone. It's not a solid, to get one dot of water, I turn my brush over. I've got one dot of water and I can put it on, and that helps me control. And then I just have a tiny bit of water. It's still too much. So I'm going to go ahead and I tapped it off. All right. Now we're going to come up here, and you may want a little bit more in that corner, just so it's more like, I like that idea of the corner being a little darker. Pardon me. It is dry. I need another drop of water. And again, I do it that way to control that water. That one dot. I'm on a direct edge right here because there's not a ton of room up here, if you can see. So I just want it darker, but there's not a ton of room on this particular surface for the size of the lettering I made. And just so you know, that's hand lettering. That's not done with anything except the pattern. And again, I think that we should treat them like brush strokes, and we should play with lettering, hand lettering more, just so that we get better and better at it. All right. And a little bit more water, a little bit more paint, kind of scumble into that corner a little bit. And that was a little bit more than I wanted. I'm going to pat it out, clean out my brush a little bit, and then let's get back in. All right. So see how we corrected too big? So I want you to know that you can do that. It's very, very simple. And you just sort of work it. I'm also, I love to watch artists that can do one straight and it's perfect. I'm not that artist. I have to go back and forth and scumble back and forth and do a little bit here and a little bit here. So here's what I'm going to show you. We're going to switch over and we're going to go back to the one we just started. So this is the one we started just from blue. And I am going to take my small scruffy. And this was just a humble little filbert. I used to love the Simply Simon brushes. They came from Hobby Lobby, but they went over to Master's Touch. But anyway, I loved these brushes when we had them. But as you can see, it's super scruffy. Looks like a troll doll. And I am going to take my white mocha. There's no water in this brush. So I'm going to, again, turn it over and make my dot of water. I'm going to put it there. And again, that controls how much water I have that I could potentially be putting into a brush. I'm going to wipe it out. Okay. I'm going to load that brush up. And I'm going to go in a little circle here, which is why they get troll doll-like, because you're down here scrubbling them around. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to again start in the center, because I need that center to be the really bright, and see how it's kind of filling in some of those smaller areas. And then I'm going to scrubble up as it dries, or as I get less in it, and I'm going up to that edge. Now before I do that, I am going to take and get rid of that pink line. So that was that chalk pencil I was telling you about. And in comments, I don't really know how videos, like creation of videos, work so much, but I think I can put in comments the brand and everything. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to just go back and I'm going to scrubble in the middle. But because we put the water here, we're not going to get the desired effect. We're going to get a smear. So you do not want to dry brush over wet, unless you want to smear, and then go ahead. Then it would be perfect for what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so I'm again in the middle because I want that to be super duper. Now the other thing, I don't know if anybody's ever shown you this, to dry things off, you can rub the surface of your piece, and what it does is the heat disperses any moisture. And so you can feel that this is like a little bit cool, like if I'm touching it right now. And if I want that to be more dry, just very gently. And you don't want to go from color to color, because if it does lift, you don't want to pull your lights to your dark or whatever. But anyway, it's a technique. If you're familiar with the artist Bobby Campbell, she showed us in a class, and I have used that since the 80s or 90s or whenever. Okay, again, we're going to scumble in a circle, but what I'm trying to do is I want these edges, and I'm using a smaller brush so that I can keep more control. So remember, we used the really big brush to get the base, but now I want to use, and I'm just pulling up paint from here. That's why I use the same one. It might be enough. Instead of loading from your puddle, load off of here. That way I don't have to try and wipe so much of it off. And I'm pushing up, 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 or to the outside. Okay, since I loaded from that puddle, I'm going to go back inside this center where I really want it to be bright. I'm going to really work it out. I think I might have overworked it and got rid of too much. Okay, back in. Now I can finish out over here. And the whole point is that I haven't gotten too close. And can I just say, I really hope this video is good, because I really can't see without reaching down and looking at my phone. Okay. All right. There you go. That is just about right. I'm going to go ahead and wash that brush out. And And this is why a lot of times I keep multiple brushes, because if I want to keep moving, if I'm doing production or I really need to get, darn my computer, it just keeps going to sleep. No, I need you. There we go. If I need to keep moving, dry brushing, you really do have to have a dry brush. And so, you know, this helps me, you know, like if I really do have to dry, but if I have multiples, then I can wash this one out and then move along to a second brush. So when you're doing this kind of technique, I don't know if that's helpful to you, but anyway, that's why I like to have multiples. So I'm going to go to this scruffy brush. I really want a bit more in this middle. And once you get more comfortable, like cross hatching can keep it from being one long straight smear. And I'm using a smaller brush. So remember, we started with a really big brush, and now this one I'm just trying to fill in and even out kind of that middle. So I want a little bit more control. Okay. Now we do want this to dry, and if you know you have a drying tool, this could be a good time to dry. Or you know, like this is the other one I was working on. You know, as it starts to dry, when it's cool to the touch, but it's not sticky, that's when you can dry. And again, you just keep your finger right on that. And okay. Okay, so I'm going to bring over this one because I've gotten the white on this one. Now here's what I am going to tell you. I have been having a really hard time. I am using folk art white. I couldn't find any Americana. And I am finding that my folk art white is picking up onto my transfer paper, and it is not accepting the transfer very well at all. And so I apologize for that. As you see me go through that, I hope you don't run into that. I did not run into that at all until I had to get new paper, new transfer paper, and new paint. The Americana, if you can stick to it, love it. It just never fails me. But right now I've had to use this folk art white. We've been out of white for a while in our local stores. So unfortunately, so what I've done here is I've added quite a bit of white, and I've really let it dry. But I am going to see, I'm going to demonstrate on here just so we can see the white moving along. I am going to demonstrate using this folk art white. You know, I do have, hang on really quick. I don't know if I can get to it. I have an extra table set up in here. Excuse me one moment. Oops. Okay. I do have a mostly used bottle of Americana. Let me go back to that. Not that folk art's bad, it just isn't what was working for me. Okay, so I'm gonna load up my like I said, this is an old used up bottle, so I'm gonna need to do a little surgery here, pardon me. Okay, there we go. I got that out of the way. All right, sorry for the intermission. Okay. All right, I'm just going to put a little bit out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my large brush again. You don't have to go with a large brush, just the largest you feel comfortable with. And on the same spot, I am filling my brush, and then I'm going to start the exact same process we did before. And we're starting in the middle. I'm pushing really hard here, very light from the edge. And then I'm lifting up. So I'm doing it very exaggerated to show you, but and then I'm concentrating right here by just doing short little strokes right in that middle. And again, what that's sort of doing for me is mentally it's helping me kind of give me an anchor of where I want the most white to be. And for whatever reason, it is working tons better than the folk art. So this one is the Snow Titanium white from Americana. And the other one was Titanium White from Folk Art. Okay, so lay flat, drag out, lift. Lay flat, drag out, lift. Come back and build out. And you're just going to keep going until you get this right here. Now, this I am going to, because that's folk art, I'm going to go ahead and put me a layer of white on here from this other brand. And I can be pretty bold because, again, I really do want this. I want it to have texture, but I want it to be really very bright white. So now these edges, we're going to do a similar thing. I've gone back to my little troll brush, my little troll doll brush, and I've wiped out most of the paint, and now I'm going to scumble in to these edges. And the reason why we put the mocha underneath it, as a reminder, was by building that interim color, giving that other layer, any of these edges, it helps you transition more subtly. Whereas if you go in with just bright white, it might not be quite as subtle. So we wanted a little bit of the a little bit of the light mocha to stay on your edges, but you're not necessarily going to see it. It's more of a visual illusion. It's there, but all right. And we're almost done here. Now I've made some mistakes on here and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. See how this line is really harsh? I'm going to go back in and I'm going to use a little bit of mocha, but up here we've also got a really harsh line. So you can see that line right there. I'm going to show you how to kind of fix that. So let me finish getting some scumbling in here, soften out these white edges, kind of come down here on the blue. We know where our pattern is, so we're not, and this is where your little hearts or your little green brush strokes are going to go, or kind of down on these bottom V's. Okay. All right. So very quickly, I'm using a scumble brush, a larger troll brush, and I'm going to load it up and I'm going to scumble it out on my paper towel. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use it to break up that straight line, because I didn't like that straight line, because none of this is straight, right? While I'm at it, I'm going to just kind of drop in a little bit on the top. So as you can see, it's very forgiving. You just kind of want to play with it and go back and forth. Now, the other thing down here, I showed you how to scumble up and kind of get rid of. But now what I'm going to show you is the same thing, but we're going to, so I just washed out the blue and I'm going to dry it off. And I'm going to be really paying attention to get rid of the water up by the ferrule. Because you can get water out of the bristles pretty easy by doing that. But the ferrule, if that gets wet, you kind of have to be careful and go back. And okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up some of my light mocha, going back to my little pity pat spot. And then now what I'm going to do on top of the white is I'm just going to kind of go back in and create a little bit of an interface. And this isn't necessary. I'm just showing you kind of another way to kind of just keep it really soft and to break up that transition. And again, it's just to kind of give you a little bit more of an illusion of real brightness in the middle and less on the edge. Okay, that's it. That's kind of what you're shooting for. Again, this can be even almost perfectly solid in the middle. That folk art paint kind of messed it up. As you can see, this one, it's really almost pure white in most spots. So I may even keep going. Okay, I've got quite a lot of white, and I'm just going to go in and I'm going to smash it. And see how I'm getting rid of more and more of that dark, just right in the center though. I really do not want that any further out. I want it right behind so that you've got a glow on your letters. Isn't that interesting how a titanium white in one brand can behave so differently? So as you notice on your pattern packet, like I said, I'm a Americana girl, but I do like Ceramcoat paints, but I stick to one brand just because I think it's just easier, especially writing out packets and stuff like that. But this color, Gecko, I cannot find a good match. I've never been able to successfully, easily match it with by mixing a few other colors. So other than that, that's my, like go-to in that brand because I love that bright green. All right, so see how I've created less blue right there in that middle and kind of made us more pure white right behind the middle of those letters. I think I'm going to like this a lot better. All right. Okay. Now we do need this to dry. So while I'm waiting for that to dry, and then I'm going to apply the pattern, I'm going to talk through your polar post. And while I'm waiting for that to dry, we're going to do a little lettering. Now, in your pattern packet, I provided this. And again, like I said, I'm just a big believer that we all should stretch ourselves. And these are all hand-drawn, hand-done, just really simple. It's also easier if you use your own handwriting. If you're struggling with hand lettering, make one of these for yourself, but in your own handwriting. All right, so I think we're done with that. I try to keep my paints in a specific order as I'm doing a class. Okay, give me a moment to get myself together here. What we're going to do is we're going to pull out our royal fuchsia. as you can see, there's 3 different pinks just to do your letter, or 3 different levels of warm. We have fuchsia, which is very opaque. We have beautiful strawberry, but it's very transparent. And then we have true red, just to turn it to a more traditional feel. Like I am a huge, like I love color, bright, different, but to keep it a bit more traditional, I've tried to keep more, you know, traditional colors. So that's where your red comes in as your very deep value. So what we're going to do here is this is going to be the base. And then what we're going to do is give you the vibrancy with this, but it really just makes this more vibrant. And then we'll shade. But for right now, for our practice, you're going to put a little dollop down. And then you do want to take your palette knife and you want to whip it. And so if you weren't aware, the way acrylic is made, if you whip it, you may not have to add, can you see? Hang on. Yeah, you kind of can at the top. If you whip it, it emulsifies the carrier with the pigments again. And it loosens it up. And you may not have to add any water. Now, I know my paint, so I know I do still need a little bit of water. But in order for, so what you're kind of looking for in this is you're looking for something that flows off your brush, but still is very opaque. And the reason why is because you don't want to have to stroke this particular brush stroke a ton of times. Now, on mine, this was the original. When I design, I just go for it. And so I very rough outline. And I don't know if you can really see, but it's kind of bumpy. It's because there's probably 5 coats of the pink on here. And the reason why is because I wasn't getting what I wanted out of it. And I'd go back and I'd do this and I'd do that. But as you can see here, right here's like where your red is to give it, and here's where your strawberry is, and here's a little more plain. And then I just did little brush strokes, but you could do polka dots. You could leave it plain. There's not stripes everywhere. Just sort of fun, whimsical, kind of do whatever you want. But your base coat is that pink. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to use all 3 to show you. I have a 2, which is what I recommend in the pattern, but I have a 1, but it's a little longer. And then I have a 0. And what you're shooting for here is a little bit more of a blunt tip. And the reason why is because you get those ends a little more blunt. So on your practice sheet, again, I had mentioned earlier, see on this one right here, I've added an outline. If you are really more comfortable with that, go through each one of these and add, and then you can trace it, and then you could use a small, and you could go in and just do a letter. And that is perfectly fine. Nobody is out there policing whether you've used a small brush, a liner, whether you've done it properly. I've had a few teachers that if you didn't do it their way, it was wrong. And I am the opposite of that teacher. If you like the outcome, then it is absolutely perfect. Let me clean a brush out here. I'm not being very good with my brushes. All right. Actually, let me get that out of there. I don't need it. Okay. I got to get my little troll brush cleaned out. I got to keep my little troll brushes. Okay, sorry about that. Pardon me. All right. Okay. Now, I am going to say, which I think I kind of said at the beginning, please change any of these colors. If you don't have one of these, this design, the only color that is in here that you need to be a little bit more careful with is the light mocha. Light mocha, it turns a bit to the warm or less yellow. Cool. And what I really mean by that is less yellow. Some of the other ones like almondine, it is just far too yellow. So that's the only one that's going to change your paint palette. So if you have a different palette, you want to change your Polar Post to green or just pure red, please do that. If you want to do it in black. It just tickles me to no end when people do their own thing. When I have 20 students, I want to see 20 different flavors of whatever it is we're doing. I just think there's so much in our life where we're told we have to follow the lines, and I just don't think we do. Okay, so now I loaded my brush with water, and I put the water down, and then I'm doing the same thing with the paint. And I'm not sure if you can see that very well, but let me bring it over. And that way we've got a little bit more on the palette. It's really important to have the right consistency. And the reason why you want to do it on your paper is it does pull. It feels a little bit closer to doing it on your surface than if you leave it in a sleeve. A lot of times when I have people do their pattern, if you do it on a sleeve, you paint on it, it flows, it's very slick, it doesn't mimic the surface, but it's really good to get your arm going. All right, let's move one more thing out of the way. Okay, so the whole point to what we're doing here, you can use a Flow Assist product. There's a ton of them out there. Every line has them. I don't. I use water because I just grew up using water. But if you need to, because I don't like it when a paint becomes sticky or if it stays open and I smear it. And so I think it's just something you're used to using. But if an extender medium is what I'm trying to, I don't think I said extender, but an extender medium, if you prefer that, you can do that. So here's what we're going to do. Make sure. Okay. You're going to press down and you're going to follow the line and you're going to lift up and you might need to load again and you're going to press down and you're going to lift up. And this sort of represents like press down harder to get sort of that comma stroke. And I'm looking here as I move my brush around. If you've never been told that, the way to get a better line is to look ahead. So if I was going to paint this line right here, I would be looking where I want my brush to go. Does that make sense? You don't want to look at where your brush is. So let's just do that as a practice. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to push down, but I'm looking ahead. And what that does is if you are watching your brush exactly where you are, you're going to start to see that happen. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going up on my finger. I'm not great anymore. I used to be great at brush strokes and stuff, but like I said, I had a little bit of a medical thing and now I'm a little more jumpy. So I'm going to now switch it up and I'm going to start from this end. I'm going to touch down. I'm going to twist around and connect. And gently pull up. And see how it looks like it's one stroke? Now, if you're really good, you just keep going around. And I'm just not good anymore. I really have to be, I just had to kind of acknowledge that I'm shakier, which is honestly why I designed this piece, was partially to sort of recover some of my abilities. Okay, so now let's just keep going. Finger up. I've loaded. And we're going to touch down, press, lift, And that one I kicked out a little bit. That's where I get a little, like, I get a little jumpy. Okay, this one, I am gonna connect that way. And this is why I'm telling you guys, you guys really have, most of you have probably painted a lot. Do what makes you feel comfortable. You don't have to follow, like I said, nobody's out there policing whether you did a brush stroke the way Jackie Shaw. I don't know if you all remember Jackie Shaw. I had a Jackie Shaw book, one of the first toll books I ever bought, and I didn't do it the way she did it, and I thought I failed. Okay, this one is a little bit of a kick out at the top and kick out the other way, lift. Now, as you can see, the line shows through. That's going to be the reality for you. So see how the lines show through? You're going to have to go over these a couple times. And that's where the thickness of your paint is going to start to come into play. If it's too thick, it won't flow off. If it's not thick enough, it's going to be too, thin, and you'll see the lines. So now let's go back. Let's go back up, and we're going to do our P again. A chunky little stroke. We're going to come around. And again, I was looking here as I was bringing that stroke around. I'm going to tuck that one in and gently pull up as I meet them together. And you want to just have a light stroke because it can be very easy. And that's why I have done this one. You can see how chubby some of these letters have gotten. And so I'm going to show you kind of how to fix them and that it's okay. I don't want people to not do it because they're like, oh, it can't be perfect. Well, perfect is how you do it. Whatever you do is going to be just perfect, I promise. Okay, so do as many of these. Oops, see how I have a blob? That's too much. And what that will do is that's going to leave. You want a full load. Very consistent. And go around. I'm going to stop there. Remember how I want that. That way I don't have to try and do a fancy little twist. I'm going to come down and I'm meeting right here. This one, as I'm pulling, even though, so I'll look here as I'm putting down my brush, but I'm going to look here as soon as I touch it. And then I'm going to gently press, and then I'm watching to get myself to the end. Now, I also twist my brush as I load, and I have heard people say you should and should not do that. I do it. It works for me. I don't use my brushes for, like for anybody that was a member of the SDP, and you were trying to get your board, that's a whole different level. Treat your brushes, buy your brushes specifically for that. Treat them like they're perfect little angels. But this is not that. Okay. The A. And you're trying to make this line and this line and this line and this line as even as possible. You want them all to roughly be the same. And this is where this practice can give you how to get that feel in your hand. So do as much as this as you want, as much as you feel like you need. Now, I will tell you, as you're doing these, the paint will start to dry high in your brush. I would say every few letters, clean your brush out and start over, because you really do need your brush to behave in a similar way for every letter. And so starting with a clean brush every few letters helps you with that, in my experience. And I have a little one sticking out there. Okay. So go ahead, keep painting. I'm going to try and get my pattern on. I'm touching it to see if it feels cool at all. It does not. Yep, there we go. Okay. All right. So while I'm doing this and you're painting your practice letters, where did my scribe go? There it is. Okay. I don't know what happened to that. It got bent. So, all right. I'm going to go in and I'm pushing pretty hard. And because it's bumpy underneath, it's a little bit harder to do your outline. So just kind of be patient, work with it, and you may have to come back with a pencil and darken it if it's not clear. Okay, so I'm going to check it and see how I've done. Now see that I've used the other white. I'm having much better success. It's still lifted a little bit, but okay. So you all do your thing, and I'm going to put my pattern on. I wanted this pattern fully on, but I did then realize I wanted to share that this paint was behaving differently, and I've erased the pattern that I put on just to kind of show that to you. But I had already put this pattern on here just to try and make the video a little shorter. You kind of want to stay true to the lettering, but if it gets a little bit off, it's okay. But you kind of want to, you only have so much space. So that's why you want to stay true to your pattern. Now, while you're at it, you can add these if you want. I really eyeball them and put them in, but if you need that assist, get your pattern in there now. All right, pop that pattern off, and beautiful. All right, let's get to painting. Oh, I promised to show you. Hang on really quick. Let me go back here. My apologies. I wanted to show you that depending on which size liner you have. So I did that in a number 2. This is a number 1, and it's also longer, as you can see. And so I don't have as much success, but that was the liner I used to use. This used to be my go-to, and I was able to really make it work. So nice, clean. And if you can do it with a bigger one, what this gives you is more paint in the body of the brushes. But like for me, I've lost some of that fine control. But there's virtually no difference in the size. I mean, it's a little bit different, but how far you press is how chunky your letters are. And that's okay. And that was why I have this other one right here to kind of show you that that's okay. And there's things you can do. We're going to kind of paint back in with some white. We're going to drop in some shadows. We're going to play with it a little bit. Then if you are wanting to go the other way, so again, I'm using a 2 for what I'm going to do on my piece. This one is a 0. So as you can see, there's only a real slight difference in size. They're different manufacturers, but even with 0, 1, and 2, you don't see a ton. But again, the bluntness is what will help you with letters. I find if it's got too much of a point, then what happens is your letters will get little wispies on the end. Okay, so this one doesn't hold as much paint. It just simply doesn't have as many bristles. It doesn't have as much body, but it may be a better one if you feel like you need a little bit more control. So see how it's finer, and I have better control with this one, but I need my letters to just be a little bit bigger. Now, you can do that, but you again don't have as much paint in the body, but you can press harder and get it to be thicker. The problem is again, you just don't have as much paint. Okay. All right. So those are kind of the differences between sizes, and sort of the body of the brush is not going to hold as much paint. So for me, I find that I really do like the 2, but use what you have or you're more comfortable with. Okay. So let's get in here and let's get Polar Post painted on. All right. So loaded my my brush with water. I want to make sure that it's got water in it. I've got a little bit of water laying beside my puddle so I can keep myself hydrated. I'm going to build. I want it to be really saturated, but I don't want it to go all the way up, if at all possible. If you do, to be blunt, wash it out, start over. If you start to get your paint high, it just creates a mess for yourself down the road, if nothing else. Okay. All right. So let's get in here and make it real. And I do it just like I would be writing it with a pen. And so these, if you want to ever do something like this, you can print it out with a regular font that's just really doesn't have a lot of flourishes on it, and get your spacing and then go over it and in your own penmanship. I'm going to drop that one in there. And you can see I'm kind of trying to get a feel for my piece, and I'm kind of going back in. And that way I have one really good even first coat on those 2 parts. Now I'm going to tuck in, and again I'm looking forward. Lift up and see how it's thin right there. That really will help you because that's where you're connecting. Okay, I'm going to put in this little flourish, but I'm not really, I'm just going to connect it really lightly, and then I'm going to flow. Now feel free to move it around and do your thing. I'm not a fan of that curl, so I'm going to go work it a little bit, and it's going to come out just fine. You need a little water. Okay, get back in here. Push down a little bit so you get that little bit wider on that outside edge. Lift. Okay, that's it. And then let it dry. And then at this point, if you feel like, oh gosh, this is the worst thing ever, you can, before it dries, you can wash it off You can repaint this, you can rebase coat, but I don't want you to get worried about it being perfect like a print shop would do, because that's not what we're doing. We want this to look like you hand wrote it. Okay, see, I've got quite a lot of paint on it, but it's very even all the way around. Okay, I'm gonna start here. I'm gonna push down. I want my flourish down here inside. I'm going to keep this one right here so you can kind of follow it. Make sure I'm in, okay? And just really making sure I've got one solid first coat. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of water. See, I'm starting to get it higher and higher. So after this next letter, I'm probably going to wash my brush out and start all over again. And that one has a little too much water, so it actually was a little too transparent. So I'm going to drag this water out of the top, and then I'm going to leave it alone, and I'm going to let it dry. Okay. So we're back to a clean brush. And again, that's to keep the control. I've moistened it. And I feel like my puddle is getting gummy. And I didn't put that much paint out. I try to be a reasonable paint person. I've always been a huge paint puddle person. But I'm trying to be more, you can make more puddles. But you can't really put paint back very easily. Okay, so I'm back loaded. And I'm going to be quiet and just finish it out. Now the S is a little tiny bit different. I kind of start in the middle to create that little snake. And then I come around and attach. And that way I can keep the bottom and the top thin. I've had to adjust, and I don't have the same kind of control I once did to keep that super thin there and there. But as you can see, by doing the S and then connecting, you can keep those very fine. whip our paint again. Whip, 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 whip. And again, what the whipping does is it re-emulsifies and really just puts the pigment and the carrier medium back together. And it allows you to use less. In this case, I use water. Now, if you are, a lover of mediums, there's a lot of mediums that are out there to, work on your paints with, but I prefer water just because I have grown up with the drying time and the control. But somebody else may have used extender mediums, or they may have used like the Magic Mix from Jo Sonja. There's a lot of different mix-ins to make your paint kind of behave a little differently. The only thing I'll use is brushstroke flow medium if I'm doing really a lot of brush strokes, because it really does hold your pigment. And so you get a good flow, but you get really good solid pigment. But for something like this, something simple and cute, you don't have to get too crazy. Okay, and I'm going to lift up. And I'm going to come back around. That way I can keep that bottom thin. And too much paint, not enough tip. Too much paint, not enough tip. And just right. Okay. So as you can see, I need a second coat. But there's literally nothing perfect about that. So I am going to show you how to do some corrections. So with this, you're going to put a little white out on, and we're essentially going, and I'm just using my same liner. I'm using almost pure pigment because I want to be able to use as little paint as possible. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of scrub. And see how I'm just doing it very sketchy. So it doesn't look like a solid bar of paint. And I do try to show people what I have had struggles with. You may not have these same struggles. It may be a different area, but for me, I do feel like I will mess my letters up. So how do I fix them without, breaking down in tears and going, oh my gosh, I've spent all this time on something. But see how it isn't just a chunk of paint. Sorry, I'm getting a sore throat from talking so much. I work from home, so I don't talk to people all day long. I mean, I do. But it's in 30-minute chunks in a meeting or something. All right, so see how it's very easy to clean up. Now, you might go, oh, but I can still see the pink. This is where your friend, the angle, is going to come in. So I get my angle wet and I draw out very gently. I never pull on my brushes, but you get all that extra water out, but it's wet. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Deep Midnight Blue, but you could use a different color. You could go back in with the purple that we're going to use here in a minute. And just a tiny dot. We're only going to put on the toe just the tiniest amount. We're going to blend it out. Flip, blend, flip, blend, flip, blend. And then we're going to go in. Can you see? I know it's upside down. I'm sorry. Okay, so see that line of pink that's kind of under there? What we're going to do is we're going to cover it. And see how it seems like a design choice? And this is something that I found as I've painted with friends who are extremely good painters, but they're not great at designing. They're like, how did you do that? Or how did you think that through? And I don't know, because to me, I don't want to cry over spilt milk. So if I just add something that's off the path, it's not on the, the instructions don't cover it, but that's how I paint. And I didn't know I did anything different until I've painted with other people. And I can think of one person in particular, and we paint together, sometimes, but extremely good technician. She has taken from like Joe Sonia for years in a row. She goes out there and has, a vacation, and she's painted in all of the big, conventions. And yet that kind of floored her, that just by changing it up a tiny bit, you can make something fixed. So that is how I would tell you to fix it. Put a layer of white in, very sketchy. Your pink still may show through, but then you're going to drop back in. And now, because it's a little different, you may want to put a little drop of blue around ones that maybe, well, all of these are pretty bad. But like this one did not need any fixing, but I'm going to drop in some blue. And you may drop in blue underneath too, just like a drop shadow. So I hope that's a helpful tip so that you understand that you're not stuck. You're never stuck. Okay, so actually, I'm going to go ahead and put on another layer here so we can finish out the lettering, and then we're going to base coat. So get your painting going. I need one more of my pink. I'm going back over to my instructions, so excuse me for a minute. I want to make sure I'm following them. I'm not great at following them. Okay. So literally the instructions are do your base coat with royal fuchsia, and then essentially, I wouldn't say highlight per se. You want to accentuate this pink with the brighter pink. I don't know if you guys have ever used Hot Shots. They were kind of like a neon. I really liked them, and they come in like, different colors. But this one is really fun because the strawberry, it's not a hot shot, but it behaves like one. So the hot shots were like neon paint. And they came in red and yellow and green and orange and a pink, but it was like a neon pink, like an 80s neon pink. This one's just got such richness to it. I just love this color, this strawberry, but it is very transparent. So right now, again, I'm just putting in a second coat. Pretty chunky because I'm barely touching. The shape is already there. I don't need the same control, but I do need it to be fully opaque, if that makes sense. So I'm not worried about the shape right now. I've already got the shape. So I'm gently touching down with a pretty heavy load of paint. And you just are very gentle with touching down so it doesn't increase your size. There I kind of made it a little chunkier, but it's still going to work just fine. Drop this up. It's supposed to be 9 degrees out today and then down into sub-zero. And I'm watching everybody from my window out moving the snow off the sidewalks. And my very darling neighbor came by with his snowblower and did mine. All right, again, I'm really I've got a ton of paint because I'm not trying to control it and keep the shape. The shape's already there. So I'm gently touching. While that's drying, I am going to add my little doohickeys. And it's going to be the shades of green. And you can do this literally any way you want. If you have a, like you're comfortable with loading, golly, that's an old icky paint. I have paints from years and years ago. And, okay. And this one, boy, I hang on to this because I can't get this local. Usually I have to order it online or if it's even available anymore. So, all right. So since this is kind of chunky, I do need to whip it. So I'm going to put it on there and I'm going to really scrub it in. And that helps me move away any of the dried chunks. I also have another tip. Just if you find that you're in a position and you're really having to use an old paint, you can take a piece of gauze and lay it over the paint puddle, and only the good paint will squeeze through. You want to put a couple layers of gauze over it, and then only the good paint comes through, and the chunky paint generally gets caught. And, you know, there's been times when I've only had a little bit left, and I've really needed to just get a project done. I didn't want to run to the store or whatever. And I've used that, and I figured that one out on my own. I don't know if anybody else uses that, but just a piece of gauze. You could probably use any other really open, like a piece of tool might work. But anyway, I find a couple of pieces though, because you do need it, you know, you need it to be so that it traps the hard chunks. All right, whipping the paint, and whipping the paint. So these three colors are the greens listed. I use a ton of the Hauser greens. I just really like them, but there are so many greens out there, and I just use what you have. You need 3 shades that would go together, or you need to mix, like if you use a dark, add a bit of like a yellow or a white, depending on what you're kind of going for, to the darker one to get it, or a little blue to a lighter one. You know, just play with it. These are not required. Even this one, there are a ton of bright greens in other brands that you may have. So if you don't have Gecko, believe me, you are not going to suffer for it. So again, Hauser medium, Hauser light, and Gecko. Now, there's a ton of ways to do this. I multi-load. I don't necessarily tip it in a specific way, but I usually start with the medium, and I tip it with the dark. So you have the medium, you're tipped, and then like I said, I don't put the pattern on for this, but feel free if you need to. Also, whatever space you have. This one has 3, this one has 2. It depends how big or small your little strokes are. So here I'm going to do, make sure I'm in here. I'm going to do, so it's just a comma stroke, press, smush, bring it up. And, like I said, there's no brushstroke police in this class. So you can fill it in, or you can do a stroke. And then we're going to go back over it because, again, we're not Donna Dewberry doing 1 strokes as an expert. And I'm going to do a tinier one. Press, chunky, bring up, kind of make a meet. Doesn't really matter. And then we're going to go over here. I'm not liking that. I think it's too dark for what I got going on. I tipped in white. I'm going to brush mix. Now, I'm not a huge brush mixer, unless I'm using brushes that I don't care about. Just like a generic brush or whatever, but I just feel like that's just too dark. I'm not liking it. So I brush mixed white into my medium. I'm going to go back over it because I can. And I feel like that is giving me a bit more what I'm looking for, because now I want to shade over that. So now I'm going to go back over here. And as you can see, I did those turned in, but these this way, again, these are not intended to be a one, you know, like look at your piece and go from there. So I am kind of wanting these to maybe be a little further down. Now I'm going to actually, I need a little bit more water in my brush. Brush mixing the Hauser green, because mine just, I didn't have enough white underneath it and it was just too dark. Now I'm going to show you. So I already have my shape, but it's not as dark as I want. And again, we don't have brushstroke police on this video. So I just cheated. And now I'm going to just do a super little chunky little one and I'm going to draw it up. And I don't really know that I have a lot more space that I want to mess with over there. Now see how I don't have a ton, it's not dark enough over, I mean, it's not, it's a little muddy. I'm going to make those a little brighter, and I'm going to use the gecko green. And I'm just going to highlight the top. Again, there's nothing, there's not just one specific way you need to do this. And then I used the little gems, the little flat back. I don't know that they're Swarovskis, but they would be beautiful if you had them. But these are from Hobby Lobby. And I am not sure of the size, so I will post that, excuse me, in the comments. All right, moving along. We're going to let those dry. We're going to continue to work on Polar Post, but I'm going to jump ahead just so I keep going. But I would typically just keep, well, I don't know, I should say typically, I would keep moving. We want to finish our letters, but let me base coat. Now, when I base coat, depending what I'm doing, I use, this is a number 8, random brand, not great, little round brush. That tends to be a go-to for me, or an angle shader. And I know that sounds weird, but for one reason or another, I have figured out how to use my angle shader to do virtually everything. Okay, so even though we're going to get back to the letters, when we put on our pattern, this is where you want to accentuate those points to his design. Remember I said at the beginning that I had kind of made him when I wanted him to be pointy. So that's where your base coat is really going to give you the line. When I'm base coating, I load, again, try to keep as much paint out of your ferrule because that is your brush control. Remember I told you I was going to put his collar on, but I'm not really following that right now. I'm just doing where his neck connects to his little ear. Now see right there how I moved some of that paint out of the brush? That is so I didn't have one of those edge rolls where it's thick on the edge and you have to brush it out. So I just tapped off some of it and then moved up into it. But you'll see when I'll start and then I'll push up. And that's how I prevent. And I used to get the worst edge rolls. And they were just awful. And I had to figure out a way to do it. And then I finally figured if you push up into it, that's how you're going to keep a nice a flat level of paint without having to go back and sand it off. I'm going to kind of give him a point back here. Yeah, have a little pointy booty. So you want to, again, start inside and push to a line. This really helps with animals. I know a lot about animal anatomy. I was a vet tech student for a while, and I did that through 4-H. So I understand animals, but I am a terrible flower painter. And so it was very ironic. I was painting with an MDA, and she explained that flowers have the same rules, if you know them, about their anatomy. And so I became a bit better. But animals just have rules. And so if you mess it up, it doesn't look like your animal anymore, right? So if you start your brush out here and push into the line, that is your best chance of keeping that animal the right shape based on your outline. Get his tummy in here. So you may want to, add, just be real careful when you're adding your lines, or re-add your lines if I lost his tummy. So I kind of just sketched it in, but it may not be right. I do need to double check it. So again, what I'm talking about, I had to add a little water. Got a little too much, so cleaned it out. All right, I've loaded my brush. Instead of starting at the edge, I'm going to start here and I'm going to push in. And that way I'm hitting the line, but I didn't start at the line. So if you start to lose control, you get bigger and bigger and you lose the design that you're shooting for. So when you're doing animals, start in the center and push to the line. Now, see how I followed the line? Paint has a bit of memory. It knows I painted it there, even though I'm going to be painting more. I don't know how to explain that other than to say it just builds memory. Okay, so now I'm going to paint this part, which is his neck. And that one, because I had a pretty washed out amount of paint, I did follow the outline instead of pushing into it. But now I'm going to go back and push into it. Now this is where it can get tricky, and where you want to be really careful is his nose is very small. So I'm going to start in this center, and you may want to take a smaller brush. It's up to you, but I'm going to be real careful to keep his shape. Okay. Now I'm going to come back down here and I'm going to finish. I've got the rest of this paw to do. And see how fine of a point I get this junky little troll brush to be? But an alternative brush to this might be this small liner, or another kind of small, like if you're more comfortable with it, I've got this small spotter, and it is a 18 spotter. And then you can kind of keep these small areas tighter. So I'm going to go back and redo his little part of his mouth that's holding the letter. Okay. All right. And then you want to really look back and just verify that you've got the look you're going for when you're doing your base coating, because this is really how you figure out his overall shape. And this is where you need to do your corrections. So again, I'm starting in the middle, pushing to the line. And I want those points. That's my, I just thought it was cute that he had little pointy body. Okay, now it's very, very light, but you can see the collar is here and up here. And those are really, you know, for you, I would recommend putting your pattern back down and drawing your collar on and your eye and your nose. I know where they're at, so I'm cheating a little, but I do think that those are the kind of small details that make or break whether you like your piece or not. Okay, so see how his tummy is wrong? So I'm going to go back and I'm going to be like, okay, what did I do? So it's pretty much dry because, again, I'm in Colorado and we're dry as a bone. So I didn't have to wait for it, but you do want to wait before you put your pattern back down. But I'm going to go in with my dark one because I need to see it and make sure. So I'm going to trace my tummy on with dark. So see how I missed his tummy by a lot. So I'm going to go back in and push down to that line. Okay. And we're going to let him dry thoroughly, and then you're going to end up with this right here. So you're wanting this solid, 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 because, excuse me, we're going to dry brush white over it, but it's going to be extremely subtle. So when you get to this, I don't know if you can really even tell, you've dry brushed white on his really high points, like where he would be the highest, where he'd be the closest to you. And you're leaving this as the subtle background white. And I did this design as a way for me to learn how to paint a white animal. And so you may see somebody use gray, and then that becomes your middle value white. And then they go dark with a darker gray, and then they come up to white as your lighter gray or whatever. I'm choosing this as my middle white. And then what we're going to do is we're going to dry brush, and then we're going to highlight with a side load. And then down here, as you can see, we've got his purple shadows, and then we're going to drop in a tiny bit of blue on top of that. So he's very simple, but he needs what he needs to get him to looking right. So get him to this solid. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go back. So obviously you can pause, but I'm going to go back to lettering. And we're going to finish our letters. Now, these letters, there's not one just right way to get your strawberry on there. If you want to use like an angle shader and truly try to shade it, that would be fine. I think I'm just going to use, you do need kind of a stiff brush. So I'm not sure my liner will give me what I want. Okay, I'm going to use this one. It's just a small round. But I likely used my angle shader. So let me look and see. Polar Bear, let me see if I recommend a brush. I do recommend the 1/4 inch. So that's likely how I did it. So I'll do it that way. But like I said, okay, so you're only wanting your paint on your toe, and you do not want it to be spread super far. So I wiped it off, and then I'm going to go ahead and tap it out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and see how it just gives it a glow. Same color. You could skip this altogether. But again, like I said, I love my vibrant, crazy colors. And I'm up on the toe. So that was why I was saying I don't know that you need to do it with an angle shader. I think you could use, this is like a #1 round. This is from Hobby Lobby Fine Touch #1 round. And I don't know if you can see how transparent strawberry is, but it really needs that underneath it. And I think what I want to do is I just want to paint the whole letter. I'm not trying to highlight. I'm just covering all of my royal fuchsia in just a solid layer. I find it ironic that we're at about 9 degrees and we're painting polar post. That's pretty funny. Okay. And this is pretty thick. And I'm just gently going back over, not changing the shape. And then I'll come back in and I'll use some of the red to give it some deeper shadows. You could also use the purple on here if you wanted to turn this to that, which might be very cute on the Valentine's one. Okay, now I hope you can see the subtle difference between the royal fuchsia and the royal fuchsia with strawberry over it, but you could not get this with your strawberry. Strawberry is just far too translucent or transparent, and you would fight it. Okay, so we're gonna let that dry, and we're gonna get back to another base coat, another layer of base coat. So, okay. Again, starting in the middle, because I don't want to lose his shape. I've already done a real good job of keeping him pretty well shaped. So I will push out. His little chubby booty. I feel like I lost a point right here that I want, so I'm really exaggerating it. And his little chubby tail. And I treat this like a brush stroke, like right there. I'm pressing and I'm moving the bristles to the edge. You might not be able to tell exactly what I'm doing, but I'm starting here very light. I'm pushing, but I'm holding the actual brush away from the edge, and I'm pushing the bristles into the edge. And again, I do that because I was the worst for getting really big, thick rolls. And so just over time, just trying to be better at, painting, I learned just don't start at the edge. Now, that doesn't mean that you're never going to start at the edge, but just generally, if you start at that edge, that's where I get that chunky roll, and it just makes me mad. Again, starting in the middle, pushing out. Excuse me. So a little animal kind of thing to think about is that when his foot is touching down, it's spread out and bigger. When it's up, an animal's foot sort of becomes smaller because the pressure is not on it. So like this one up here is off the ground. And so it's a little finer because it's not got the pressure pushing it and making it flat. Or chubbier, or however, I don't know what the right word is, expanded. Whereas this one is on the ground. And so it's a little bit chunkier. And the other thing, and these are really subtle things that when you look at it, it feels right or wrong. Animals have certain gaits, which just means that there's certain feet on the ground at the same time. And I honestly don't know if I paid attention when I finished this. I almost always do an opposite. So this one is on the ground and it's out front. This one is on the ground or coming down to the ground and it's in the back. And then these two have this one pushed off and left. So just so you know, there's rules. Those are those mechanical rules that it looks different if you don't do it right, but you may not know what it is that's wrong. So I do try to think about those things when I'm designing. Like I said, this one I literally just drew it and painted it at the same time. So I don't know if I paid too much attention to the mechanics. Someday I'll be better at flowers because I guess they have mechanics too, but psh. Okay, this is dry. So now let's go in and we're going to do the same thing. I think I'm going to use my round again. And this time I'm going to use my true red. But you could use a different set of colors. There might be a different red. There's Red Alert, I think, is the one that I find is extremely orange. So it works really good with oranges, but it doesn't work good with a pink. So the true reds seem to do okay. So reds are kind of transparent as well. So what we're trying to do with this red is I did it like down here, but then I've gone back over with purple, and I may not have put that in the instructions, but as you can see, there's just touches of red. And so and see how it gives it just a little something. You don't necessarily know what, but it just gives it a something. So I'm going to kind of hit each letter just in a different place. And again, not necessary. If you did not do this step, literally no one is ever going to know. Or you could skip these all together and just do pure red letters. That could be really adorable, especially on this Christmas one. Or if you did just red hearts and red letters on the Valentine's one, that could be really cute. Do that there. And you'd kind of want what you did on the P to be the same as what you did on this P. But if you don't, not a big deal. All right, now I am going to show you the placement because you may not have crystals. I'm going to just use the bottom of my brush and I'm going to dot in 3 light dots. And that way, if you don't want to do a crystal, you have just an alternative way. And like I said, I'll give you the size of crystal that I used. Okay, while we're at this, I need to really clean his head up. So his head is a little misshapen. So I would put this down and I would go back over and make sure his head is correct. I know what I did wrong. I've got it too high right there on his little nose. So I'm just going to extend it out and I'm just going to clean it up and it's going to be just fine. But for you, you may want to put your pattern down and do any fixing right now on your base coat. So I just sort of straightened this out. His little black nose goes right there. And then I just straightened out these other areas. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add white. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Polar bear. Okay, so we do our white before we do the envelope and the collar. So I used, on my white in here, I have my green kind of that I used. So I'm not sure what I need. So when I keep these wet and I rinse them, but then I keep all my brushes together and I go give them an actual wash when I'm done. So I kind of keep them separate. So I have my extra brushes over here that haven't had any paint in them today. And in all of these, I will paint, even if I didn't use them, if that makes sense. That's just how I make sure that everybody gets a good bath when I'm done. You might have a different way you do it, but that's how I do it. Okay, we're going to do dry brushing again. And, or scruffy brushing. However you want to think about it. This is a fully dry brush. And I don't need, because we're really, what we're doing right now is incredibly subtle. I don't need any moisture in my brush. I don't need this paint to move very well. I'm not going to get streaks. So the reason why we did the light mocha on here, if you recall, is because I needed the stages to bring us up to pure white. If you start with pure white, you may get streaks. In this particular case, we're already white. Excuse me. So what we're trying to do is we want, again, his parts that are closer to you. We want those to get white on them. The parts further away, or that would be more in shadow, we're not going to touch those with white, but we can use pure white. We can go directly in. We're not too worried because if we have a streak, it's a white bear. So if that makes sense, we're going to go in fully loaded. We're going to wipe it out a little bit. Biggest brush you're most comfortable with. And we're just going to start. And you can see where his tummy would be closest to you and would not be in shadow. We're going to make him white. And it's very subtle, and I'm not sure if it's coming through on camera. And I'm kind of I'm at about that angle. And I'm just wiping it down. And then I started in the middle, and now I'm working my way out. Because again, it's a very subtle difference between his mid-value white and his white. Okay, so we're going to refill. And I'm going to think, where is he white next? This is, oh, you know what? So for you, before I do this, you know what? I think for you, at this point, you might want to reapply your pattern. This is probably a good time to do that. I'm going to give him his nose. I'm going to give him his eye. I'm going to give him the lines on his collar. I'm going to give the front leg. I'm going to give the chest. I'm going to give the tummy. And I'm going to give the scoop on the leg. So everything that's out front, I need this little elbow. So front leg, tummy, because it's going across this back leg. You need his chest, because it's going across this back leg. You need his eyeball and his nose. And then you need his collar. And why you want this on now is because this is going to help you. Now, this came out super duper dark. And I am going to use, I bought one of these, and it comes, you can buy these erasers as a set and refill them. And I have a couple of these things, and I really like them. There's a ton of erasers out there. I like them because they're white, and they've never failed me. So anyway, that's what I'm using. And like I said, I probably, any place that sells, like office goods would have this. I don't know if Hobby Lobby or Michael's has it, but I feel like those are really dark. I am going to go back in, and I'm going to just gently rub those away. And I'm doing it really gentle because I still want them. If you really needed to get rid of them, you can get in there and just really get rid of them. Also, make sure that you don't have any little grubblies off of here, around here, because they will get stuck in your paint terrible bad. That's just my own personal experience. Okay. Still a little bit dark, so I'm going to rub a little bit harder. And the ones that are going to be real dark or you're going to have an outline, those are fine. But these right here, you're not necessarily going to have dark outlines for all of his body parts. Very subtle outlines. Okay, sorry, had to fix that. All right, so before you start your white dry brush on his fur, put your lines back in. Because now you know where the things are going to be. And for one, you also know if you have a shape that you don't like. See, this is, I'm the worst with my brushes. I really am. Okay. All right. So let's get back, dry our brush out. It can have a little bit moisture, but okay, we're going to pick up the white. We're going to go back in. We're going to dry brush. Okay, so we've got our white tummy. Again, we're going to start at his most white part, and we're going to work our way out. Excuse me. So the chubby shoulder would have more white on it, but see how like down below as it starts to get thinner and it comes down and it would be bent in, like the angle. And so I'm not going to go down there so much, but I do want my angle. Now we are going to side load and get some more white in here with a side load. So you don't have to worry too much. This isn't the only way we're getting white on him. Again, this would be his thigh. And so we want that chunky monkey because he's a healthy little bear. And we want his little booty. So we're going to, get up here and get his little booty. And these are all the spots that would be closest to you. And then leaving below that less white. So it'll be very subtle, but I think it's just a really pretty little subtle way. And this isn't a big, the haunch, his shoulder would have a lot of white on it. And then we'll blend it down into, it would dip in between his tummy and above this. So we're going to have a little less there. Now, if you're like, I don't need all that, you could absolutely just paint him white, and you could put some subtle shading in with some of the colors, and that would be perfectly fine. I think sometimes we look for permission to take shortcuts, but honestly, if like you were going to paint a bunch of these as gifts, that might be an easier way, faster way for you to make, 10 or 12 of them or whatever. But when I make my designs, a lot of times my designs are to stretch me and to do something unique and different. So a lot of times they're very fussy, even though it's a small, maybe somebody thinks of Christmas ornaments or little ornaments like this as something not important or whatever. I use them as an opportunity to stretch my abilities. So his little muzzle down here will be white, but there's going to be a dip in there. So we're just going to add a little bit of white here and there. Nothing too perfect. And I really want this chubby part in the middle to stick out. I want his shoulder really to stick out. And I want his booty to stick out. Okay, now you can add a little bit of white down in here, just a little bit, just to get, to lighten it up a little bit, but you just don't want a ton. Okay. Now what we're going to do, pardon me, is we're going to do some highlights and whites on here. But we also need to do any highlights and whites that we want to do on our polar post. So the original one, I had done just some cute little white lines, but you might not be able to tell, but I kind of outlined them in white. So you can get as fussy as you want with your lettering. I'm going to use my tiny spotter, and I'm going to add some like random, I'm just loading with some watered down white. You're looking for, like cream, maybe consistency. And I'm going to put just some sketchy little lines. And then I'm like, you know what? I think that's not showing up maybe exactly how I want it to. I'm going to drop in. And that's likely what happened here, because I do feel like I probably have some purple down here that maybe is unaccounted for in your packet. Like I said, I design as I go. So as I do things, it's hard. I've not necessarily planned every step, and so I might forget them in my instructions. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going back to my angle. I've got a tiny bit of blue on just the toe. I'm going to spread it so it's super controlled, and I'm going to probably outline all of these. I just feel like I don't have enough definition, and I want it. And see how I have it almost straight as I'm on a very skinny little letter. All right, so you would kind of go through each one if you felt like the same way. Now, again, I'm going to go back and I'm just going to put in a few sketchy lines. Just because I like my letters to have a little bit of zhuzhiness going on. But I don't think this is important. Or you could do dots, or you could do whatever. You could outline them in a darker color. You could outline them in white if you feel like you've lost some definition. But that's all I'm going to do for polar post. That's it. I'm not going to do a lot more to that. You could also add some glitter to them. All right, now what we're going to do is I'm going back into the white with my angle. This is a 1/4 inch. And now I'm going to really enhance. I want his ear is solid white. And see how that pops right out? And then his little forehead, solid white. And you're just accentuating his outline. So it's the opposite of an outline. You're just bringing in the most highlight. And you're essentially going to kind of go around his entire body. And you're really going to highlight him. And that's what gives you that illusion and the difference between those subtle colors, that he's white. And then we're going to do some brush strokes. That we're going to do these little brush strokes off of some of his pointiness. Okay. I am so sorry. Excuse me. Okay. Really want to accentuate these outside edges. Now, his little booty, this would be where the sun might hit it up here. But the sun probably won't hit it right there. So we're not going to put it, even though we're not in the sun, it's still the same philosophy. We're going to put it where it's going to get the most light hitting it. And we might leave off where the light's not hitting it. So right here, we're going to put it here because it creates distance from that inner leg. It just continues to help us the illusion. So even though that's kind of on his underside, we want that separation. And we're going to do the same thing with his little front elbow right here. Going down the back of the leg. Again, even though it's underneath him, we want it to be brighter white than... And then kind of down here, because this down here, his leg's sticking out a little further. So we might want that one accentuated, but not the rest of it. But here, this is his chest, and it's in front of that leg. So we definitely want that bright white. Now, I don't know if you can see it. I have a little ridge of paint. I'm going back in and I'm patting it down with a lightly damp. And then that way I don't have to have an ugly roll of paint, but I also didn't disrupt my forward progression. It's not super wet. Okay, I'm refilling my brush. All right. Again, you can see how much I've used. Most of it doesn't. I'm giving us this little lip that goes down, and we're going to clean that up. I kind of made it a little bit big because the envelope is underneath it, and I can use the envelope color to come up. Okay, the front of this leg. This is the leg that is in front, and so we're going to bring it up. And this is why you needed your pattern back on. So we're going to put the front of that toe, front of the chest, down here on his little cheeky, maybe a little bit on his front toe or on this back toe that's behind. See how subtle it is? It's not super like, you know, he's not like a solid bright white snowman. Well, he might be a snowman, but okay, we're going to take this 18-aught script liner, but any tiny detail brush will do. And we are going to actually put in his little, I need a new blob of paint. And I'm just going to brush load with some water and just kind of pull it out and fill my brush. So I feel like I've got the right consistency. And what I'm shooting for here is I'm going to do little short comma strokes. We're going to do these. We're going to do a few more of those later, but for me, I find that this helps me understand where I need to put my shadows. So I'm going to put a few up here. And off of what would have been a little point, I kind of lost my point, but they're kind of like his little booty hairs. And then a few off of here. And this just gives that illusion that he's a little furrier. Okay, now I'm going to put in, now again, the reason why this is just because this is my weird little way of understanding how the body lines up. I put those in just so I understand that right there, I want to make sure I don't really have any dark colors. This is where your purple comes in. You could forgo the purple and go straight in with blue, but again, just sort of, you know, building out depth. This is a wider shadow, and then there's a small blue shadow underneath. So that's why I didn't go straight in with blue. I have this inner rim shadow, which is a purple. And again, because I like all those bright colors. And I think that's where this letter, even though it doesn't call for it in instructions, you've got some purple on these letters just because it tied it in another area. There's kind of a rule of thumb. If you've got a color in your, palette, you should have it on your piece 3 times. You know, it's not always tried and true, like, you know, guaranteed you're going to see that, but that's a really common design choice. And again, that's one of those things that those subtle small differences kind of separate out your design. All right. So, and I'm just following the pattern, the picture, or in this case, the original, but that's all you're going to do is follow your picture. So you can see right here, that's what we're doing here, is we know that this leg is behind. And so we kind of want to cause it to recede. And we want that purple down kind of far. And you could do a couple of coats. Okay, we want in front of that. Now, I feel like that's a little too much. So I'm going to wet my brush and I'm going to curve it out underneath. I want it to make sure it's not, so I'm taking my my heel, and I'm just digging it out. And then under here, alongside anywhere there'd be a shadow, maybe under his eye, maybe around his little nose that we haven't put in yet. Now, it's a C-stroke. It's a little hoopy-doo. Very subtle. We can add more. And you're just going to keep going all the way around him. Tummy, leg, toes, booty. So we're going to get in underneath his tail. And I just took the heel and pushed that in. Now I got to get rid of that though, because I don't want it on my next shadow. So I want it a little darker up here and less down here, because this really would be tucked under, but his little booty comes out and it would get bright pretty quick. Then I'm going to tuck in. I'm going to tuck in on his toe. And then what we're going to do here, this really makes the difference, is get that leg and push it back. Then underneath this part of his tummy, you want a little bit darker, like under his elbow. A little bit darker underneath here. Come up, follow it over. and then just a bit on his tummy, because this bit right here sticks out pretty far, right? That would be tucked under, that would be tucked under, but kind of in the middle. So we want a little less there. Okay. A little bit down here, get his little tootsies kind of purple. Little tootsies purple. And then the back side. Now the collar, again, just a little bit kind of down on the bottom. Real light wash. And then kind of a little bit on the top. But this is how I knew I didn't really want a big shadow up here, because I have these hairs coming off. And those hairs wouldn't be coming out of the shadow the way I have it designed. So just a light, but heavier at the bottom, smaller at the top. Make sense? And you would add more or less, kind of looking at it. There's one spot I've missed. He has a little elbow thing going on, and I did not define his elbow. And this is where the rules of anatomy sort of separate your little guy from a cartoon, where he's still very cute and cartoony, but he's trying to be accurate. So I needed a little bit behind his elbow. All right. Okay, so as I'm looking at it, I'm seeing that this part, I've got a little more shadow going on there than works for me. So I had to get rid of it, and all I did is I took a little touch of white on the toe, and I started in the middle, blend to the edge. Now, I am going to go ahead and put his little eyeballs in. Again, that's a reference. It helps me. And this is the first time we're using it. It's just black. And I like lamp black. I do not like soft black. I like a dark black. I only need a touch. I am a huge believer in clean brush and take it right out. That's how much I need. So it's not on my palette. I've got my outline on here, and I'm just gonna, and you could do this with a dot, but his eye happens to be a little elongated. So I just use my spotter, but you could use a dotting tool if you're more comfortable. And then this is just a tiny triangle. It does stick off the front of his face, and it comes into his, and this is where you make sure your pattern is on. And you can make your nose a little bit bigger. They do kind of have, when you draw them like this and they're cartoony, a little bit more of a larger nose. Okay, we're moving along here. I'm still not satisfied with these. These are not right. These have not popped. So there's a couple of things we can do. We can go back in and put them back in with another green. We can outline them. We can play with them, but all right. Okay, we're going to add the blue shadows that go over top of the purple shadows. So again, we're going back to our liner. Our angle. And I have a bit of blue on here, and I have way too much. So I'm going to pinch it out because I still want it, but I need to really keep it on that toe, because when you do shadows and you've got a couple of steps, this one is much shorter. And this one goes in the very deepest. It doesn't go completely over the purple. It goes in the same place, but it's smaller, and it's just to enhance the purple. So it's saying the purple is even deeper right there. So we're going to kind of do there, and we kept it really a little wider at the bottom, but very narrow at the top. And then I stopped right about there. So this top, you could keep going, but this just gives you that illusion. A little bit on his little tootsie toes, a little bit on the bottom here. a little bit in his ear, a little bit right here. Oop, I'm running out of water. Little bit behind here, little bit under here. And it's just very subtle addition. And it's where you want it your darkest. And I forgot to purple up his little toes, these little toes down here. So I'm going to scrub that out and add a little purple. And then we'll go back in and add a tiny bit of blue. And that is that. Okay, now down here where this is, you can kind of darken that up a little bit. We're going to put some little white fuzz because that's his little chest. And he's going to have some little extra chest hairs. So I'm going back to my, I apologize. I think I moved this. I hope I've been on camera. Gosh. Okay, so I've reloaded with white, my 18 script liner. And right here, and then you can see I've outlined it, but we're making these little chest hairs. And what we're doing is we're crossing that line, that blue line. And I honestly make them little tiny comma strokes. You do need it like heavy cream. That's why you're going with a little one, is I do tiny little comma strokes. Little comma strokes. And then this is where I can go back in and I can add a few more and connect and kind of give him a little bit more fuzz. Like those. Those are not great, but those will work. And then what I'm going to do here is, it's easy to lose the top of your ear and you want it to be super bright white. I'm going to go back in and I'm going to put a stroke. And this is real heavy, real thick white. You might want to do that on the front of his forehead. Okay. All right, that's that. Okay, the envelope, literally do whatever you want, but in this case, I have the collar first. So I used Hauser Green Light. This is that icky bottle. I have so many bottles of this. It's insane. Okay, there we go. All right. All right, I'm going to use my spotter. And I'm just going to add a little bit of water, fill up my brush. And I'm going to get in here and I'm going to do the collar. Now this might be something that you need to add your pattern again. So just be aware. There's a part of it, the collar, that tucks behind his neck. And then the rest of it is in front, of course. And then the same down here where you've got essentially like a little J shape. And that just gives the illusion that it's curved. And this, like I said, you could do any combination. For my design, on it, there's some gold to look like bells. And those are just a bit bigger size, but the same brand of Hobby Lobby crystals. And they're just glass crystals. Like I said, I love Swarovskis, but I don't always go to where they sell them. Maybe they sell them at Hobby Lobby, but they have a larger selection of, they're not Swarovski brands, and they're not quite as sparkly, but they're still quite lovely. All right, so his collar. And you can kind of leave a little bit open, like there it's blue. Even though there's collar back there, the shadow's built in that way. And then also I did the letter to match. And this is where I'm going to clean up a little bit of that extra muzzle that I gave him, and that was too much. I'm going to do the little trick with Q-tip or whatever these things are. Okay, let's clean that up, and then let's go back in. I have a little bit of water on my brush. Need that off. Okay. And this you can get, put different colors. You can do different designs. You can leave it kind of plain. In fact, I might make that just a tiny bit larger because today I don't feel like my lettering for Santa will be very small. Now, if you are not familiar, this line and that line should be parallel, so there should be an equal distance between them. And same with this line and this line. So if you find it's wonky, you want to take a ruler or like a business card and square it up. That's the rule for a rectangle or a square. So for this, it can be a little wonky, but I have found that I've had to kind of go back and just really check myself. So like this one's a little wonky, but you can just fix it. Give it a little bit in the right spot. But if you're finding it looks weird, that should be a straight line. And it should be the same distance from the top of it there to the bottom of it, top there, and then you can kind of measure it if it's looking weird and you're really needing some help. But I don't know that it's critical to do that. I just sharing. All right, so it calls for the gecko for this part. And so I'm going to give myself a little bit of gecko. And I'm also, I think I might redo, and I'm going to use my little round, my number 1 round. I'm going to redo these, and I'm going to do them in pure gecko because for some reason they're just not showing up today, and I'm not fussing with them. It calls kind of for a double load in the instructions, but I'm just not feeling that. And now they're popping. Now, I may go back in and do some shadows on those, but All right, so it calls for some highlighting, and so what we're doing is we're just leaving the Hauser green, and then we're just making it lighter. This is splitting on me, and I don't think I use that brush very much. This is the one I've been using. It's a Daler Rowney. But I think I got this in a watercolor set. And but it's, again, really long. But it's very soft. But it's got a really thick body. So you can carry a lot of paint in it. And it's stiff enough that it moves paint really well. Anyway. All right, so when you're doing a small space, you really want that paint worked in because you really don't have a lot of it's small. It's a small area. So I'm really needing the control. I need the paint to be there and I need to be able to deliver it. So you want to load it, but you want to keep it in that very top part, in that toe. And that way you don't end up, so I'm starting and I'm giving it a bit of a highlight because this would be the top, right? But then down here, I only want it on the inside. That's where I have this highlighted. And then the other side I'm leaving maybe a little bit, kind of in the middle, a little bit further out. And then the same you know what? This was based with Royal Fuchsia. My apologies. And so I needed Royal Fuchsia. And so I'm going to do that really fast. And I'm going to just, because I messed it up, but for you, just paint the whole square or rectangle Royal Fuchsia. But since I already have a green border on it, I'm going to leave it. And so as you can see, it was pink with a green border. And I was going the opposite. I was going to do a pink border, but I'm trying to stick to my instructions. I told you I redesign things. I'm terrible. I don't follow instructions. All right. There we go. Crisis averted. And then I'll just go over that green edge is with gecko. So we'll pick up some gecko in our 18 script liner from Master's Touch. So this is straight from Hobby Lobby. I used to love brushes, but boy, when brush companies started to go under and stuff, I just got to the point where I was like, I'm not going to get in love with a certain brand. Like Papillon, there was a line, I think it was Papillon, there was a line of brushes and I adored them, and then they did away with them. And so I kind of stopped being really committed to a brand or whatever because I just found that it just didn't last for me. There's a chunk in there. I'll leave it. I'm not sure. And I may need to clean up his little muzzle and get some white on it, but because it's looking a little chunky funky. And it's in front of the envelope, so you definitely want the last layer of paint to look like it's the one that's closest to you. In this case, it doesn't. It doesn't look like the lip is on top, so I need to work it. Okay. We're going to let that dry, and I am going to I'm just going to show you how I would do Valentine's on this one. I think like you could use whichever colors. I didn't really do, it was when I realized that, you know, we're right on top of Valentine's Day. I was trying to think of what I would do. Honestly, I think I would do the polar post in either just the straight red, or I would do the fuchsia, but then do red and get rid of that other pink, and then do these hearts in red, or don't put any red and then do everything in the fuchsia pink and strawberry. So I think I would go one way or another. And then down here I would do red, white with a red border. And then the little bow, you know, I would do like just red. And so the heart's red. So just make it more just red. So that's what I'm going to show you. But honestly, I'm going to use my pattern, but I would just draw it on if I wasn't teaching. So anyway, we're going to put on, oops. Our little pattern. Make sure I'm still in. I apologize because I really stopped looking at the camera enough. I have messed up. And I've been off camera. I apologize. This is just a simple bow, nothing fancy. And I drew it kind of light. I'm going to use red. And I'm going to show you two different ways I would do the hearts. Okay, so this I'm going to put on. And I would do the polar post to match in red. So like I said, you either want to pick the pink or the red. I think I would pick the pink or the red and stick with it, but I don't know that I would mix the pink and the red for Valentine's. Here, I would outline. The envelope would be white, outline in red. But you do need the red over the white, or the red loses itself. It's not a very, and it's opaque, but it just doesn't, red is really fussy about what's underneath it. Okay, I might drop this down a little bit and give myself a little bit more color. And then the bow, I know you guys can't see it very well. I did it very light. It's just a truly simple bow. With simple, short little tails on the bow. And I am very careful to keep the top of my bow tail very skinny, because there's so much that goes on around a bow that if you make it how a bow really would be, it just gets super, I don't know, messy. And I'm just not a fan. So if I'm hand doing a bow and I'm not drawing a pattern, I draw a line, I draw a little curve, and then I just attach, if that makes sense. So I keep it super skinny. That one's a little wonky because I'm trying to demonstrate and all. Okay. So for this, I would go back and I would redo my lettering. So I would just do this for my lettering. Make sure I'm in here. I would just plain red. pretend like that pink's not there at all. And I feel like that just turns it to true Valentine's, you know, Day a bit better. And then there's two different ways to do hearts. And one, so you want to kind of soup this down a little bit. You want this about heavy cream consistency. And we're going to dot. And you guys might have seen all these techniques, so please just zoom past them if they're something you're like, oh, I've done that for years. Again, I just don't know if some folks are going to be doing this as beginners or not. All right, so you need kind of big heart bumps, but then you take this and you draw and undersize it. You want it to, oh, I've got some more golden glitter, another hair. Okay, hang on. Okay, so you want to keep this bottom point really narrow as you're kind of pulling the paint down. And then, of course, your other way is just more of a traditional heart where you brush stroke it and brush stroke it. And it kind of just depends what you're going for. I feel like if you have the dotting available, you know, like that, you can have time to water it down and do all that. I prefer the dotting one. I think you get a more traditional cute with a little less work. But totally up to you. Put your little scatter of hearts here. And put a couple over here. And again, it would be really cute. Even if you had little crystals that were heart-shaped, that could be really cute to do, you know, glue those on. I love a bit of glitter and glitz, but I do not like it to be like overwhelming. I like it to be subtle. I'd like it to be a beautiful addition. All right. So that one's looking a little funky. We're going to draw that one down. It's going to end up being a little bigger than I wanted. But there you go. All right. So as you can see, I need another coat there. So we're going to have to wait for that to dry. All right. So in order for the lettering to show up, I think a little better, I did a little bit of white in the... I'll find a good brush to do this, I guess. We're going to just do the round. We're going to do a titch, just a tiny bit. Essentially dry brush, a little bit of white into the middle of the card. And this just, again, gives it a little dimension and gets your... Now, I did not, because the actual pattern calls for the crystals, I'm going to go off script and I'm just going to do some quick little bells for you in case you don't want crystals or you don't have them access to crystals or whatever. So I'll do those next, but those are not part of the pattern. I'm going to take, hang on, let me step away and get, I'm going to get some gold. Okay, so So I grabbed, and you can see how old my paints are. This is from forever ago. It's just Empire Gold, but it's just a mid-range gold. It's just a gold paint. I don't, like I said, I'm going off script. I don't have a good alternative, but any of the golds would do. You don't have any gold on here, so it's going to stand out and be different. So it doesn't have to be of a specific palette. Isn't that wonderful? This paint is legit 10 years old, at least. Paints just used to be built different. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to water this down heavy cream. And we're going to use a brush handle, and we're going to dot some beautiful little bells. Like I said, and I'll make sure that you guys get the size of these crystals. But the way I did it, I didn't paint on these. I crystalled them. And they're little flat back crystals, and I'll get you the size. And there's nothing else on that. And we're almost done. We just have to put his little tail on. His little canceled postal thing. Okay, let's find a really big, okay. All right, I don't think that's enough. I think I need more. Okay. Okay, heavy cream, because we need it to level itself out. The thing about dots is you could use full paint right out of the bottle, and especially for little ones, but they stand up, and that might not be what you're going for. Okay. Okay, I'm getting a lot on there because I want it to be able to spread out. I'm going to do the one in the middle first. So essentially kind of find your center and put her down. Now that's not big enough. So I'm going to go back down on it with more paint, and I'm going to up and down, up and down, up and down. You can also go around, but I find that I get ovals that way. So I'm pushing it out by adding more paint. And there we go, success. So it's still kind of chunky, sticking up, but for this, it serves. Okay, one at the top, because he's got a bell collar on. So he has bells all the way around. He's jingling all the way. Now, we do need to let those dry, and then you just put an X on it and then slap some gold paint on it, if that makes sense. They're very simple. It's that, let it dry, X, maybe some dots if you really want to get fancy and make it look like a bell where there's, at the end of the X, there's a line or whatever. But for now, we're going to let that dry and let that do its thing. And then we're going to go back, and I'm going to show you how to put this part on, and then we'll put it on the other one, and then we'll finish with the inking. All right, so let's finish putting the red on here, and we are almost done. So I'm going back into my red with my 18 script liner. I'm getting this back on. And for this, honestly, I would just outline. I don't know that I would try and shade and get super fussy on the red. Again, I guess I think of Valentine's just as really crisp, clean reds. I don't think of them as subtle reds that have a lot of finesse to them. Designing this specifically to be a Valentine, I might think about it differently, but I don't know. All right, I'm going to finish these letters just because visually they're going to annoy me, and that's just how I paint. I correct things, even though I'm going to have to correct things again. I'm going to bridge over. So see how I've got paint there? And this is how I prevent from getting paint on my, or smearing my paint, is I put a bridge, and then I've got my hand on my hand, and then I'm just very aware that I have a bridge and that I'm fussing. And I'll go back in and I'll clean this up, and then I will give you guys a picture of this done, and that way you'll have it. Like I said, I just made a quick addition to the pattern just because I thought it would be precious for you guys to have a couple options. And honestly, to show you how easy it is to alter a pattern. I have probably altered people's patterns before and made them for different holidays or different, usages or whatever. And I painted this polar post specifically to show you how you can correct messy. So I am going to go back and I'm going to make corrections to the polar post, but it'll probably be a little chunkier than my original. All right, so I'm going to get, I need that to dry. I'm going to just show you, I have just a whole bunch of pens. But for this, I really want the very smallest. So in this particular case, I'm going to go, I think I left my smaller one downstairs. I'm going to go with the 02, and I'm going to use Micron. And what I started to say at the beginning was just that you have to spray seal it or it will move. And so I have found a ton of other pens that are like, this is an amazing pen. And you can paint, you can put brush on sealer over it, but it's super chunky. And there's just no way to get the detail as tiny as you need for this design. So what you're going to do is you're going to be very sketchy. First time in your life somebody gave you permission to be sketchy, huh? You're going to sketch around. And you're going to put the pattern on and you're going to follow that. Now, if you prefer and you want it, you can also use a circle template. And it was the 1 inch and the 1/2 inch that I ended up using in your pattern. So the 1 inch and then the 1/2 inch, and then you could sketch inside of that. So if you have a circle template, it's a 1 inch and a 1/2 inch. And it also can change. If you have a different, I don't know, whatever, you could change it. You just need enough space to put whatever words in here. Now, 1933, I did just because I have a lot of fond memories of music from the 30s and 40s. Just my parents were older, and so that was just more sweet. But like on the pattern, I put 2000 because on the Valentine's, I think I put 2000 because that's my son was born in 2000. This one's 2005 because it's 2005. So these you can tailor and make it whatever you want. You just use your own handwriting. So let's go ahead and put our pattern on. See how we're doing over here. See how shiny that still is? Those are a ways off. So we'll do some line work on this, but we won't do the circles on this just yet. I could freehand them, but let me just show you how you're going to put this on. You're just going to take your pattern and you're going to be very light. And that's really the key. As you're putting this pattern on, stay very light. And because he's white, it's going to help you. You're going to be fine to keep him very light with your transfer paper. Okay, so pretend he's white, pretend he looks just like this. I kind of messed myself up. I should have put my pattern on before I did the gold, but it's all right. We're live, and I don't know how to edit videos yet, so we're going to do the best we can. All right, I am going to do the Valentine ones on here, and I'm just sort of lining him up. I'm going to lay this on, and then I am going to... Why do I keep losing my stylus? What is that about? It just keeps running away. Okay, now I am going to use this just to show you. So even though I have the pattern, make sure I didn't move it. No, I didn't. Okay, I'm going to use my one, and then I'm just going to very lightly go around, and then I'm going to go down to my 1/2. Gonna go around, use my skinnier. All right, and then over here, I'm just gonna trace on these lines. I was too light. Isn't that funny? I was trying to be very light, and I was way too light. All right. Still, I don't know what I was doing wrong there. I got the pattern there. All right. Let's do it one more time. Nope, I tell you what. All right, so you're going to use your pattern, and you're going to transfer it that way. Mine, for whatever reason, I'm having a hard time. I'm just going to put it on here, and I'm just going to go for it. But you're going to use your pattern, and you're going to put it on, and you want it to be fairly light, but you are inking over it. So if it ends up getting a little dark, it's okay. You want it to be mostly on the white. Design-wise, I would have loved it to be off his booty, but unfortunately, because his booty is... because it's so dark outside of his booty, you'd lose your design. Okay. Then I'm going to draw on with pencil. You're going to use your pattern. You're going to put North Pole. And it is just my handwriting. So it's nothing special. Use your pattern. I'm going to do 2025 because this is Valentine's. And I'm going to do 214. And then I'm going to do 2U. And then you're literally going to be sketchy, and you're going to chick, 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 chick around. Because you don't, like postal stamps tend to be sort of degraded. If you like a cleaner look, feel free to just do a solid line. You could even do a solid line with this, or you could do your sketchy line with this if you have a template. A circle template. But for me, I really like sort of the sketchy line, and I'm just very careful, very light, very gentle. Get your circle on there, and then it just looks a little less perfect. And then just ink your North Pole on, and just keep going. And that is how you're going to finish him. Now let's see if we're dry on our actual one that we've been working on. No, we are not close, but I will. You know what I'm going to do? So I want to make sure I don't mess up. And this is where the designer brain comes in, and I highly recommend tap into yours if you don't already. But I am going to cut off the part that is going to interfere with my gold. And I'm going to tape it down. Just remember, my gold was super juicy and very kind of thick. But I need him to line up, and I need him to be just right. Okay. Let's lay down our paper. Now, the original pattern isn't quite an inch. When I remade the Valentine ones, I used an inch because I wasn't sure what I used. Looks like 15/16, but I think I simplified it for the Valentines because that's an odd number. But did I still use a 1/2 inch? That's the question. Nope. I used a 9/16 because, you know, that's handy. All right. So let's see if we successfully, we did good. Okay, let me put on, I'm going to just follow that through, follow that through, follow that through. All right. Now, and again, you're going to use your pattern and you're going to put on the words fully. But for me, they're my handwriting. I'm just going to do them freehand. A little bit sketchy. So if you do have a circle template, I highly recommend, but I know not everybody does, so then just try and sketch it the best you can. Now, I'm going back on, but I'm being very, very careful, and I'm having to hold up that edge, but you can smear Micron. Micron is just fussy. I love them, but unless you're on paper, boy. And then I'm just going to do my lines, and you want the lines parallel, so you want them to kind of be equal. And then I'm going to do North Pole. I'm going to cup over my gold that's still wet. $12.25. And then to Santa. T-O-N-T. And then you're going to kind of go in and you're going to sketch out an outline and some of this will be more detailed, and others, like where it's white on white, you kind of want a little more sketchy. But around the green, you know, it can be a little darker because it's dark. But like right over here, you know, you might want to add a little bit, but you don't want it to be a lot on the white, because he really wouldn't have black on him, right? Like right here, it's in your shadow. So you kind of want a little bit more black. So as you're kind of doing your outlines, just follow along. It looks like I left off a few little, you know, areas where I could have added, you know, given him some little fluffs. So right down here, we want this to be kind of just to enhance those little brush strokes, and then just kind of keep going around here, kind of sketchy, a little, maybe a few little to kind of break that up a little bit. And here, just a little sketch, maybe a few there. And to make this look, you're going to extend down past, and you're going to follow the hook up, if that makes sense. Okay, he needs a little eyebrow and just a few little lashes coming down off the bottom. And there, you know, you might want to go around and do here. You might want to add some, you know, highlights. Like you can see, I kind of zhuzhed it up and fussed with it a little bit, but it's up to you how much you want to do. I'm going to finish outlining this, and then on your gold ones, these are still wet, but you could just do an X like this. And once it's fully dry, you could add just a few gold comma strokes around the edge. At this point, you're going to spray seal it before you actually put any of your sealer on there. And then I used Distress glitter, but any white glitter that you want to use, you're going to add, I used triple thick. So once it's sprayed, use triple thick or whatever sealer you have, or clear glue. You're going to add just a subtle clear glitter. I guess there is one final thing. I did put some wispies down here, but after you're kind of done with him, he does get very subtle. There's not a lot to it. So I guess I kind of forgot. Sorry. Just make some wispies, and I just have it corner loaded. And so as much white or as little as you want along the bottom, and then a little bit of white glitter or crystal clear glitter. You could do whatever you want. Now, again, on the back, I used the dark blue, but it could be really cute to do the pinks back here or the greens, and just splatter it. And then I use usually a satin finish on mine. But I believe we're done. Holy smokes. I think I got through my video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it brought you joy. The only, wait a minute, hang on, see, there's always something more to do. I needed a little bit of highlight. So white on my letters, just a little. And this would be along the tops. Subtle. But as I'm looking at it, I'm realizing that I left just a tiny bit off. But it's not even necessary. I hope you enjoy it. I hope that you had fun. I hope you learned something. And I hope I wasn't that off-centered the whole time. Thank you so much. I appreciate your attention.